And a pleasant good afternoon to everyone out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince Tadari. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher, the man, the myth, the legend. And we are here for our Monday conversation. And we are only a few Mondays away from the start of Notre Dame football season officially. Well, the season kind of has started, but we're a couple of Mondays away from the first game, I should say, and when we'll be breaking down that Florida State Notre Dame game. Very, very excited about that. But we are, we're about as close as we can get. We're talking about what our season schedule is going to be, how we're going to be doing things every day. That's what we're doing behind the scenes. I'm fired up. There's so much good news for Irish Breakdown. So make sure you check out over at the boards. You can see boards.irishbreakdown.com. Some fun announcements over there. So I would check that out if I were you. And if you don't have access, there's a very simple way to get access. Just go to boards.breakdown.com and you can be number one. I will tell you that if you are not a member of the boards, there was some great intel piece there by Brian put up last night, working overtime on a Sunday evening, putting out all kinds of good stuff, which I read as well, which I was like, yeah, this is good stuff. Okay, here we go. And then Brian had an announcement to put out there today. So make sure you go check that out. And lots of good stuff.
Real quick on the boards. If you have already signed up for Irish Breakdown in the past through Sports Illustrated, you do not have to sign up again. You do not have to double pay. All you need to do is send me an email at brian@irishbreakdown.com or shoot me a direct message on Twitter, either one. You can find me at Coach D178. If you've already signed up for a message for the website, the SI, through the SI website, whether you're monthly or annual, shoot me an email and I'll get you the process on how to sign up so you'll get free access to the message board. You can also just obviously sign up directly through the message board and not have your SI account. You'll get access either way. But if you like the SI way and you want to go there or you're already there, totally fine too. It's an independent thing, but if you've been a supporter of ours already, we're not going to punish you for that, right?
Right.
We appreciate that. So we're going to get you access. So that's the question that people have asked. So if you've already signed up, all I need is just, hey, here's the email address I use to sign up. And then I can find you and when your subscription lapses or all that stuff and get you access. So just want to make sure that that's clear to people as we push these boards. If you've already supported us in the past financially and you're already a member of SI or Irish Breakdown through the SI way of doing it, don't worry, we'll get you squared away. But if you want to just join up directly with us, and that's good too. Either way works for us. So we're excited. We just want to grow. We want more people on there. We're finally getting some really good discussion going on there, which has been great. A lot of fun, but that doesn't mean that the YouTube channel is taking a backseat to anything. So we've got a very, very pertinent topic. It's not a surprising topic, Vince. Jack Coan has been officially named the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. Brian Kelly did that on Saturday. And so the Jack Coan era officially began this weekend.
Yes.
And so we've talked a lot about Jack Coan over the last several months since he signed with Notre Dame. And we're going to talk a little bit about sort of how our opinion has changed and all that, but we're going to dive into Jack Coan's game, what he brings to the Notre Dame offense, what we think we're going to see from the Notre Dame offense with him in charge. And we've got a little bit of film we're going to show you today too. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's dive in, Vince. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, so we want to talk about Jack Coan, obviously, but I think it's important because we've had this discussion before in the past, even before they went and got Jack Coan and all that. What kind of quarterback does Notre Dame need? What kind of quarterback is out there to be had? What kind of quarterback can lead a team to a national championship? I think there's different answers to all of those questions, and we kind of want to dive into, okay, what are the different types of quarterbacks that are out there that can lead a team to a national championship? What are the differences, right? And so we kind of want to dive into that because there's tiers of quarterbacks, okay? There's your Trevor Lawrence quarterback where he's a transcendent talent. He's a leader on and off the field. He's all these different things, which is great. But he can put the team on his back as he did against Ohio State in the playoff game, right? I mean, he won that game for them. Let's be real clear.
You're talking about after the 2019 season.
Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. That was the Trevor Lawrence game. No question about it. They couldn't stop him. They couldn't stop him through the air. They couldn't stop him with his feet, which was a newfound, entity that people really weren't anticipating. And he is a dynamic athlete in space too. So there's that guy, right? And Brian, you can add names to that list, but I think people understand Trevor
and they
Lawrence.
don't all have to be generational like Trevor Lawrence. I mean,
Right.
Justin Fields is that way. We've seen guys like that in the past. Some of them end up being first-round picks. A lot of them do. It's the Kyler Murrays. It's the guys like that.
Right.
And obviously, that's a great way to build around a quarterback. I mean, if I could get a Kyler Murray or Trevor Lawrence on my football team, I would want one. But I think we also saw last year, Vince, that with Alabama, that it's not the only way to win to dominate a quarterback. Because the one thing that you and I agree on is you need great quarterback play.
Yes.
To win. But I think the misconception is that you always need an elite talent at quarter, like 6'5", big arm, 4'5", you know, all that kind of stuff. And and that's not necessarily always the case.
Agreed. Hey, we did get a super chat, Brian, that I want to hit. If you want to go down and grab that one, want to make sure we talk about Ricky Maltby. Thank you, Ricky, for the support. Really appreciate it. He says, just snagged 4 ND versus Cincinnati tickets for only $425. Now the wife and I need another couple to go with. I have a feeling you might be able to find some takers within the IB family. Just a hunch. But that is going to be a good game. I'm actually really looking forward to that game.
Yeah,
so you got a good one.
And the AP poll just came out, and Cincinnati's the only team ranked ahead of Notre Dame, like on Notre Dame's schedule. So Notre Dame is 9th in the AP poll. Cincinnati is 8th. So it's going to add even more intrigue to that.
Yeah.
Vince, I think that's a good thing for Notre Dame. Look, it's silly. You and I agree.
Yeah.
But to me, if Notre Dame beats Cincinnati and Cincinnati's ranked higher than them, it's a good thing for Notre Dame.
That's a good point.
But you only have an hour, so let's not get distracted.
Right. Let's not get out of Let's
not get distracted
because we could easily go down that rabbit hole. So there's the elite talent at quarterback. That's this tier, right? Or that's this group. We'll put them over here. There's another group that I want to talk about, Brian, and I think this is where probably Jack Coan would fit into the mix. You've got just to use a current name, the Mac Joneses of the world, right? The guys that, and in the past, have been labeled as game managers, I guess,
which has turned into like a negative, like it's an insult, like the guy's not very good.
Right. Okay, a game manager to me, and I like your terminology of a point guard quarterback because I think that definitely describes the position a little bit better. But it's a guy who's going to get the ball in the hands of the playmakers. He is going to go through the reads. He is going to run the offense. He is going to be very efficient in the offense. He's going to take what the defense gives him, and he's going to be successful in doing so. And that is exactly how I would describe Mac Jones. And I don't know if people were paying attention last year, but they won a national championship with Mac Jones at quarterback. And there was a time where he was a top 3 NFL draft pick.
People were considering him. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And he's ended up slipping, but he was still a first rounder.
15th, right?
Right.
You know, but I think the reason we point to Mac Jones, and I'm not saying that Jack Coan's going to play like Mac Jones. I'm not saying he's going to throw for 4,500 yards and 45 touchdowns, complete 77% of his passes. The point is, however, is to point out that there's different ways to be highly effective at quarterback.
Correct.
No one is going to confuse Mac Jones physically with Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or Trey Lance or Kyler Murray, or pick any other elite physical talent at quarterback. Mac Jones is elite based on what he has up here. Correct. And with his ability to run the offense at a high level. And it's the kind of guy that says, hey, I'm surrounded by elite players. Let me be elite up here and with my traits so that I can be the part of sort of making sure that I'm getting them to maximize their talent. Right now, the point guard quarterback is not going to win you a lot of games if the talent around him is mediocre. Right? That's the reality. Okay. And this is one of the things that, or I shouldn't say mediocre because I'm going to say this and it's going to seem like I'm insulting the Wisconsin players.
Right.
If they're not if you don't have Chase Claypools or like the Notre Dame talent now, if you have, with all due respect to Quintez Cephas and Jake Ferguson and some of the guys they had at Wisconsin, which are solid players, but let's be honest, those guys weren't skill players that were going to go toe-to-toe with Alabama and Ohio State, right? And you need to be in the right kind of offense. But if those things match up, that point guard quarterback can win you a lot of games.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, a lot of games. And we saw that last year. If I had a team and I was starting a quarterback and it came down to Justin Fields or Mac Jones, I'm taking Justin Fields.
Yeah.
I'm taking Trevor Lawrence. I'm taking Kyler Murray. And I'm not even blinking and thinking twice about it. But when you look at what that team had, I'm taking the Alabama team over the Ohio State team with with Mac Jones, a quarterback.
Right.
Because it's like, hey, he may not be an elite talent, but he's got great players around him, and he's the guy that makes sure that the thing runs smoothly. And that's why I say the point guard quarterback. And I try to point out it's not, the Derrick Rose, Allen Iverson, point guard that that guy's a scorer. I've got scorers all around me, right? It's my job to make sure everybody's getting their touches, everybody's getting the ball, that we're attacking the defense wherever they're vulnerable. If they try to do this, we're going here. If they try to go there, we're going here. And that's what I believe big picture Jack Coan brings to the table. He's not going to blow anyone away with great sexy skills and all those type of things, but the kid, this is based on what he did at Wisconsin on film, what he's did in the spring and what we've seen in practice. And Vince, the interesting thing is this was not you and I's initial opinion of Jack Coan. I was not high on Jack Coan when when I first heard Notre Dame was going after him.
Right. Me neither.
Because we had casually watched Wisconsin, and it's a boring offense, and he threw a lot of quick throws and underneath throws, and it just was like, whatever. It wasn't until you dive into the all 22,
right,
and you really break them down like for multiple games that you realize that was more of a Wisconsin offense thing, but this kid's got some tools. And that's the key. But you put players around him, you put some playmakers around him, the things he did at Wisconsin that are then translated into the Notre Dame offense, which is more shotgun-based than Wisconsin was, which is more spread the field-based than Wisconsin's was, which is hoping to be more explosive than what Wisconsin's was. You start getting kind of fired up about what he can bring to the table.
Well, there's no question. And I think that there's a lot of aspects of Jack Coan that people don't understand. And because they think of Wisconsin. Look, I'm pretty dialed into college football, not as dialed in as you are, but I'm pretty dialed in. I watch a lot of games. And when I think of Wisconsin football, I think of big offensive line, hand it off to a really good running back, running yards, right? I mean, that's Wisconsin football, right? And they take those 3-star offensive linemen, they turn them into 5-star dudes, and then they go. And that's what I think about. And I was like, wow, really? We're going to get the quarterback from Wisconsin? Like,
is Jonathan Taylor coming with him?
Right.
That was my first thought.
I can hand off too. Like, that doesn't really excite me very much. But then you have to do your due diligence, and you've got to watch the film, of which you and I both did. And you realize that, okay, this kid's more than just a handoff machine. Like, he can run this offense, and he can run this offense pretty darn well. And we're going to get into some specifics, obviously.
And sometimes the offense you run, Vince, can hold back what you can do as a quarterback.
That's a really good point.
Perfect example is Joe Burrow. I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and, we were talking about the Notre Dame offense, and they were like, look, we're talking about LSU's jump in 2019, how they went from an offense that scored fewer points than Notre Dame scored in 2020. In 2018, they averaged 32 points per game, barely over 400 yards per game, barely over 5 yards of play, way below Notre Dame's production from 2020. And then next year, obviously they had a great year. So I was talking to somebody about this, and they were like, well, they had 3 first-round draft picks, basically 3 first-round talents. They had Joe Burrow. They had Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I'm like, true, but none of those guys look like that in 2018. Exactly. That's my point. No one looked at LSU in 2018 and were like, man, they got 3 first-round draft picks at receiver. They got a first-round draft pick, a running back, and Joe Burrow is going to be the number 1 overall pick. Nobody thought that. Now, if you'll recall, I predicted LSU to be in the playoff in 2019, to make the college football playoff in 2019, because I didn't know a thing about Joe Brady, but I knew that they were going to open up the offense. And when I heard that, I said, look, they got the talent. The talent is there.
Sure.
And I felt Joe Burrow was that point guard quarterback. Now, what we saw in 2019 is that Joe Burrow had a lot more athleticism and running ability than we realized, because he wasn't allowed to do that a lot the year before.
Right.
And we realized Joe Burrow had even more talent than I thought. Jack Coan's not Joe Burrow. The point, however, we're not asking Notre Dame to score 50 points a game, and we're not asking him to throw for 60 touchdowns and 5,000 yards like Joe Burrow did either.
And people need to understand, we are not predicting Jack Coan to be the #1 overall pick next year based on what he does at Notre Dame.
Right.
That's
when you
not
look
this
at
conversation.
Right. But when you look at LSU in 2018, Joe Burrow completed 57.8% of his passes for 2,894 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 5 picks with a quarterback rating of 133.21. Okay, that's what he did, and that was as a senior in college, his first year as a starter, right? With the same players he had around him the next year. If you go look at 2000, and then you go look at what he did in 2019, he jumps up to 76.3% completion rate, which is almost a 20% jump. Over 5,600 passing yards and 60 touchdowns with a quarterback rating of 201.96. Right. So again, I'm not saying Jack Coan's going to do that. That's not the point. The point is a system change.
Yes.
Allowed a quarterback to go from a guy that was playing in an offense that was very vanilla, very dull, and that you get a system change. The same players went out and put up great numbers. Now, we're not even talking about Notre Dame making a system change. We're talking about him going from Wisconsin to Notre Dame.
It's a system change for Jack Coan.
Right. And then you look at Jack Coan in 2019, if you compare his first year as a starter, compare that to Joe Burrow. Again, Joe Burrow, 57.8 completion percentage, 16 touchdowns, 5 picks, 133 quarterback rating. Jack Coan completed 69.6% of his passes for 2,727 yards, 18 touchdowns, 5 picks, with a quarterback rating of 151.76. Now, those are not sexy numbers, but if you put it into context, if you go from Jack Coan, the starter in 2019, to Russell Wilson, the starter in 2011, between those two quarterbacks, so 11 to 19, Russell Wilson, right, Super Bowl champ, MVP.
Yeah.
Nobody completed more. Russell Wilson's the only quarterback to have a higher quarterback rating or a higher completion percentage than what Jack Coan had in the same offense, right? Same dull offense. In fact, Jack Coan is about 3 percentage points lower than Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was over 72%, which is insane. Especially then. In 2011, 72% was nuts. No other Wisconsin quarterback was within 5 percentage points of Jack Coan. So Jack Coan was closer to Russell Wilson than any other quarterback was to Jack Coan. And no other quarterback had as high of a quarterback rating from that span either.
And so that's comparing apples to apples because
exactly
it's the Wisconsin offense.
Right. How did he do relative to other quarterbacks that ran that same offense? He was significantly more effective throwing the football. And I've heard some people say, well, he had, look who he had. He had Jonathan Taylor. And I'm like, true. But the two previous years they had Jonathan Taylor also. Corey Clement was a guy that rushed for a ton of yards. And during that same time, there was this guy named, I don't know if you've heard of him, Vince, Melvin Gordon, who ran for 2,500 yards one year. They had, remember in 2012, Monty Ball ran for over 800 yards. They had another running back run for 800 yards, and another running back that was Melvin Gordon's freshman year ran for over 600 yards. So it's not like Jack Coan was working in a situation that no one else had ever worked in before.
Right.
So I think all those things factor into it to say, hey, look, you get the right system, you get the right trigger man, and you can see a jump in production because that trigger man knows how to get the ball to the playmakers.
Right. Exactly.
And that's what we're looking at here. We're not saying he's Trevor Lawrence, not saying he's Joe Burrow, but I believe he's the right fit for the talent that Notre Dame has this year, for the system that Notre Dame wants to execute this year. And that means the ability to tack on all 3 levels. And that's kind of the lead into the specifics about what Jack Coan brings to this Notre Dame offense and why this is was a big pickup for Notre Dame. And it's important that he's carried that into fall camp. Because here's something that, Tommy Rees had said when he announced that Jack Coan was a starter. Look, they wanted to give him some extra time, which I think is smart. Mm-hmm. But if they weren't sure that he was clearly the guy, they would not have made the decision right now.
Right. I agree. This is the earliest they've made a decision like this in a long time when there's been a competition. I should say when there hasn't been a returning starter. Yeah, I guess the best way to put it, right? Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at it, Vince, and you say, hey, listen, that's fine. He beat out a redshirt freshman that's never played in a true freshman. Okay, that's fine. I get that. I truly get the skepticism. But as we put out in the intel feature that I put out yesterday or last night, Jack Coan has been on fire to start fall camp. And a lot of the intel that I had about him last night was not coming from Notre Dame offensive coaches and Notre Dame offensive players, people that have an agenda. It was other sources that have either no connection to the Notre Dame program that have been at practice, or sources connected with the defense that are like, good Lord, this guy's really good.
Right.
You know, and so I just want to add context to when we say that. A lot of
they
stuff
don't have a dog in the fight
can be agenda driven, right? And that's why I've always tried to say I want to get neutral intel or intel that maybe is not normally as complimentary. And I think that adds a little bit more of I feel more comfortable putting that intel out there. And it's just, I had the update on Jack Coan during the summer, had an update on Jack Coan last week, and it's been the same thing. The guy has complete respect of his teammates. The guy makes a lot of throws, a lot of big time throws, and everybody continues to be surprised by the physical tools. Now, I'm not going to assume that he's got more improved physical tools than what he had at Wisconsin, right? I'm not, for the purpose of this conversation, we're just going to assume he is the same guy he was.
What we've seen on film. What we've seen.
Right?
Now, what we've actually seen with our own eyes.
The Notre Dame coaches have all said he's got a better arm than we thought. He's a much better athlete than we thought. We're not going to talk about his ability to run because I haven't seen it on film. I'm going to trust them, but we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to assume things that they're telling us that we haven't seen with our own eyes. We're going to base off what we've seen at Wisconsin and what he did in the spring. So just off that, not even what I'm hearing about how well he's playing this spring, we're just going to base this conversation off of what we as football coaches and offensive football coaches, both of us have a background as coaching offense, quarterbacks, receivers, and things like that. What we see on film in regards to what Jack Coan brings to the table. So if the Notre Dame coaches are correct and Jack Coan brings a little bit more to the table than maybe even we think, then obviously that only ups the ante.
Sure.
But I think it's fair, Vince, for us to go off of just what we can evaluate with our own eyes.
And I will say, since we are talking about evaluating with our own eyes, I will give a little bit from what I have seen at practice.
Because you've been to 2 so far, right?
I've been to 2, and there is some stuff that I've been able to glean from a Jack Coan situation that we'll talk about when we get into some of these specific attributes. But that impressed me. And it had nothing to do with his athleticism or his wheels. They wanted red jerseys. I mean,
the dude that impressed you with his running ability wears number 12, not number 17.
Correct. Right? Absolutely. Yes. There's no question about that. That was pretty impressive. 23 and 25 and 22 and 24.
But they're not playing cornerback.
But we're not talking about those guys. But anyway, so let's talk about Jack Coan's makeup too, because that's kind of where I want to kick things off. Because he beat out a redshirt freshman and a true freshman. I get that. I totally get that. But you also have to understand, I think a question was asked of Brian Kelly in a press conference was, are you taking into account, what he did before he got to Notre Dame, or is it just what you've seen with your own eyes? And he basically said we were
kind of, it's like it took him, he tried not to laugh about it. Like,
right. Like it's just, I get why the question was asked. I understand it, but of course you have to take into account what was taking place before he got to Notre Dame.
Right.
10-game winner, Rose Bowl, leader on that team, and it's a good team. Look, and of course Brian Kelly is going to say he has respect for the Wisconsin program. They're on his schedule this year, okay?
And he does actually.
But he does. Yes, exactly. Yes. I don't want to. It's not just
Paul Chryst is one of the most well-respected coaches in all of college football.
Correct.
Because a lot of people, here's exactly why. A lot of people look at his team and say that guy wins a lot of games with a roster that I would not trade him for.
Correct. Yes.
And now there's players here and there, but if you go look at the NFL draft, it tells the same story.
Right.
There's a lot of guys that, top teams, Ohio State's not trading very many of their players for Wisconsin's when they play them in the Big Ten championship game. That's the difference.
Yes.
That's the difference.
And to speak a little bit more of his makeup, there was somebody asked Tommy Rees about Jack Coan and how he responded when he was told that he was the starter. And Tommy Rees goes, have you met him? He's kind of a reserved dude.
Yeah.
But he just goes about, he puts his head down, he puts the blinders on, he goes to work. And Jack Coan said that in his interview. He's like, look, I didn't know anybody here. He's like, I just decided I'm going to show everybody what I'm made of by working hard and just being that guy. And think that's kind of what you get. He's not going to be a rah-rah guy. He's not. I don't believe that's not what I've witnessed.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some intensity. Vince, for me, it's even bigger than that. I would be a little upset if he was excited about, like, fired up, like visibly fired up about winning starting job, because it's like, well, that's not what I came here for. I didn't come here. The goal wasn't to start. The goal is much greater than that. If it was just to start, I would have gone to somewhere else. You come to the game because you understand there's championships on the line.
Yeah.
And just winning the starting job doesn't do anything about that. And I think that's another reason why I think there's a lot of purpose with Jack Coan and what he's doing. Like, okay, yeah, this is just part of the process to get to where we want to get to, which is to go out there and win and compete for a championship.
And he's got a quiet confidence about himself. And you, of course, you need to have that as a quarterback. I mean, I don't want a quarterback that's going to be doubting himself behind center. That's not what I'm looking for, obviously. And I'm just saying that it's a good thing that I'm seeing that from Jack Coan, and you can see that in his play. And so I think all his entire makeup, he's a leader. It's clear. We've heard that 100 times from the time he stepped on campus in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. He's a leader. The guys respond to him. All of that is important.
Right.
And I want to get that part out of the way because I think he checks a lot of those off the field boxes already before we even see him take a snap.
Right. And then just resume wise, football, he started obviously the 2019 season, led Wisconsin to an 10-2 regular season, lost to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, a game they at halftime, and then lost to Justin Herbert in Oregon by a point in the Rose Bowl. Both of those teams finished in the top 5 that year. His best game of the season, in my opinion, was at Minnesota. That year, Minnesota was ranked 8th at the time, and they ended up finishing the season ranked 10th. So beat a top 10 team on the road convincingly, by the way. Beat Michigan that year 35-14. If you remember, that's a Michigan team that beat Notre Dame pretty soundly that year. Was a 4-year starter in high school at Sayville High School in New York. Passed for 9,787 yards and 128 touchdowns. Also rushed for 2,551 yards and 33 more touchdowns in high school. And a lot of people on this channel know this, but we'll remind it again for any first-time listeners. He actually committed first to Notre Dame in high school to play lacrosse before he really blew up as a big-time football player. So that is a bit of Jack Coan's resume. So let's kind of dive into, Vince, the things that Notre Dame is getting in Jack Coan that we can assess. And obviously you talked before, experience is obviously one, but it's not just experience, Vince. It's big game experience. That's a key for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's been in a Big Ten championship game. He's been in the Rose Bowl. I mean, and he has been pretty successful in those games. And he's led his team to a division championship. On his side of the Big Ten. That's why he played in the Big Ten championship. So, he's played in big game. Look, the Big Ten, arguably the second best conference, and maybe not even an argument, really, second best conference in America behind the SEC.
From a depth standpoint, I'd probably say that's fair. I think there's a debate to be had, but certainly that's where I would lean. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'd lean there.
Yeah. And he went to a big time program. Wisconsin's, they play big boy football in Wisconsin. So I mean, it's not like it's not a situation.
Not transfer from Marshall or Western Michigan.
I was just going to say Marshall. So there you go. Yeah, I was just going to make that comparison. So I appreciate that, Brian. Thank you. I'm very excited about what he brings to the table from an off the field standpoint. So let's talk about some of his tools on the field that we've been able to witness either on film or in person that we think is going to make him successful with this Notre Dame team, Brian.
Well, one of the first things you talked about from the practices that you've seen. And we saw this to a degree at Wisconsin, but because of the type of offense that they run, which is a lot of it from under center, we didn't get a chance to see it really a ton. Yeah. And that is the ability to get the ball out quickly.
Yes.
Now it's harder to get the ball out quickly, Vince, when you're in the under center in a play action based pass offense. But he has the ability to get the ball out quick. We saw that in the spring a lot, and we got a couple clips of it against that we're going to show here. But also, it's something that was the first when you called me after practice. That was like the first. No, actually, you texted it to me during practice, and then when you called me afterwards, it was the first thing you talked about, which is he can get the ball out in a hurry.
Yeah. Yep. And that's going to be really, really important because the way we see this offense going. It's going to be get the ball out of your hands,
Right.
get it into the hands of the playmakers, and
Right.
whether that's just a look at me route, whether that's RPOs. Because look, you got to remember with an RPO situation, there's a lot of mechanics that go into it. You may have to ride the running back a little bit. You may have to get the ball out, ride, throw. There's a lot of movement that has to take place. And I'll tell you what, from the catch of the ball to the release of the ball is incredibly fast. I think I might actually take a stopwatch on Thursday to maybe just kind of see what it's like, because he was by far the fastest quarterback to get the ball out of his hands and accurately and precisely to who he needed to get it to. And believe me, we've seen at Notre Dame, just because you get the ball out quick doesn't mean it goes to the right place. We've seen balls go straight into the dirt. We've seen guys have issues getting the ball to where it needs to be on the perimeter. So not only was he getting it out quick, but he was getting it out accurately and where it needed to go.
And that ball placement is important. And there's two parts that make getting the ball out quickly important. One is just the snap to release quickness, right? So that's RPOs, it's screen game, it's the now screens, it's those type of things. But then there's other parts that I think are really going to add a lot to this offense that maybe we haven't seen as much. And that's the ability to, even in a drop back, get the ball out quickly as pressure comes. Or, hey, I'm getting to my third read and he's about to break open. If I can't quickly get the ball out by the time I see it, then reset my feet, then cock, and then throw, he's not open anymore.
Right.
That's right. He will be against Toledo,
some teams, sure,
and Navy, but we don't care about that. You're not being brought to Notre Dame to beat those teams. You're being brought to Notre Dame to beat Cincinnati, Wisconsin, Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, right? And to me, that's the thing that we did see on film at Wisconsin, was the ability to quickly get the ball out under pressure. And I'm going to share a clip here. This is against Minnesota. Now, all the clips that we're going to show are from the Minnesota game. The reason I chose the Minnesota game, number one, it was a big opponent, right? Top 10 that year. But also, I like the idea of using one game as a data point to back up an argument, because if you're just cherry picking a play from this game and a play from that game, it doesn't necessarily indicate that the guy did that with any type of consistency.
Right.
So in this type of situation, I think it's a better argument to use a game, right? And we picked Minnesota because it was on the road, top 10 opponent. It started snowing pretty bad in about halfway through the game, and so he made some big time throws. But this is an example here that we're going to show here is of him getting the ball out quickly as a guy comes open. So they're going to run a corner route up here to the top of the screen, and you're going to see him just kind of it comes open and just the pressure's coming, right? So Minnesota, this is a third down play, right? So the nose guard just the guard, the Notre Dame or the Wisconsin guard just gets destroyed on this play.
Yes,
and the guy comes right up the middle.
Oh my God!
Edge player comes right up the middle. 3rd and 4. They're running a corner or a pivot route here. Jack Coan's got to get the ball out to his left with a dude right in his face. Watch how quickly he speeds up this throw to get it out. He never sees the throw. He never sees it because he gets drilled. And he's able to – that's confidence, that's willingness to take a hit, and bam, right there, move the chains.
Yep.
So instead of punting from your own your own 16-yard line, you just now move the chains despite the fact your offensive line did not do its job. And that's what we talk about. We talk about getting the ball out quickly, make a quick read. And again, you don't do that if you're taking your eyes off the defense or eyes off the routes because you're worried about the pressure.
Well, it's also
he never looks at the pressure.
And it's also trusting your wide receivers to be in the right place at the right time. And that's huge.
Right.
That's absolutely huge. And your intel piece, I think, from last night really kind of tells the tale about him and his relationship with his receivers up to this point.
Right, because we've heard that from the beginning him and Michael Mayer were on a good place, Vince. And then then we started to hear about him and Kevin Austin starting to connect. Well, in the intel feature we had last night at Irish Breakdown, now him and Braden Lindsey apparently this past weekend in the scrimmage on Sunday have also now started to get a connection. And we'll talk even more about that when we get into the final piece of what Jack Coan brings to the table.
Yes, we will.
But that's an example of just something like in the past, the last couple quarterbacks didn't handle those kind of pressures real well.
Right.
And getting the ball out quick, like speeding up your delivery to get the ball out quickly in order to beat a pressure, because it's not always going to go it's not always going to go how you want it. It's not going to always go where the pressure, the line does its job all the time. No line's going to do that, right? It's not always going to be where the call is perfect. You have to be able to then go out and make a play, and that's obviously something that we've seen from Jack Coan in his ability to go out and make plays. So,
well, and making a play with your arm,
right?
Making a play with your arm, and I think that that's an important delineation here, because in the past, you know, if that play happened to Notre Dame last year, it would have been a roll out of the pocket, make a play with your legs,
or just throw it away,
or
take a sack,
Yeah, exactly. And I don't even know if I don't even know if he would have escaped that particular pressure.
That one would have been taking a sack or throwing it away.
Yes,
most likely.
Right. So that's something that he brings to the table that Notre Dame hasn't had in a little while. You know, standing in the face of pressure and delivering. So
right.
I'm excited personally about that aspect.
Right. And then the second part, Vince, is it's fine to have a quick release. It's fine to have those tools. But if you can't be a quick decision maker at the end of the day and throw with good timing and anticipation, we're going to explain what those things mean. But those things are very important. That's something that made Mac Jones incredibly talented. You want to talk about why Mac Jones is so good?
Absolutely.
It wasn't his arm, wasn't his athleticism. It was his ability to read a defense and make a quick decision and throw the ball on time and have great anticipation. Those two things are not always the same, but when they are working together, it's exceptional, which means essentially one of the things that has hurt the Notre Dame offense, and this goes back even before, you know, Ian Book, this is a criticism of Ian Book, but this is also a criticism you and I had of Brandon Wimbush, and it was a criticism you and I had of times of Deshaun Kaiser in 2016, which is they wait for guys to get open.
Correct.
That's not going to work against the best teams on the schedule.
Right.
And it's a bit of say, hey, look, I'm reading the defense. I know what's about to happen. I know based on how they're rolling that this route that we're running is going to come open. So you either A, throw the ball when that guy gets to the top of the break, or sometimes you're going to throw the ball into space knowing that guy's going to get there. And that is obviously something that we saw a lot from Jack Coan. His timing as a passer is really good.
Well, and what's important about that, while you pull this up, Brian, is the fact that when you wait for the guy to get open, by the time you throw it, that window is closed. And that's the problem against better teams, is that window is not going to be open as long as it is against a Toledo or a Navy. Right. And so you can't, and you have to anticipate. You have to anticipate. Otherwise, you're not going to complete that pass. And we saw that a lot too. It was, the first read's not open, tuck and go.
Right.
And that is not the case with Jack Coan that we've seen thus far on film.
Now, this is essentially a version of the smash concept. So you have a corner route, and actually, if you watch it, the outside guy ends up running an inverted corner route. The outside guy just runs a bit of a stop route. It's essentially a different way to run smash concept. And so you see it's cover two. So he knows it's cover two, and the corner is, so if you see this is the corner up here. The cornerback is squatting on that quick route. So he knows he's going over the top, right? He now knows that my read is the corner route, okay? But as you can see, the safety is not exactly –
he's not closing.
He's pedaling, right? So you know that I've got the window. The window's there. If you wait, however, that safety is going to have a chance to make a play. I believe that's Antoine Winfield Jr., who ended up being a second-round draft pick this past year. So you wait on that guy, it's going to get incomplete. But watch how when this guy is, I'm going to try to stop it here.
Pause it right when he's pulling the trigger.
Well, the receiver's not even in, like Jack Coan's already here, which means he already cocked the ball back, and the guy's not out of his break yet.
Exactly. And that is so key. That is the anticipation that we haven't seen, and that he is anticipating. He knows that safety is in his back pedal. The safety is just now coming out of his back pedal because he sees Jack Coan throwing the ball, but it's too late. It's too late because Coan has already noticed that his guy's going to be open. He puts it right where that guy's going to be.
Right. And he doesn't lead him too far to the sideline. You know, he puts it on him to where if that guy can make a play, he's got a chance to, or make a guy miss, he's got a chance to go do something. But, you know, that's just something we didn't see enough of in previous years, that timing, that anticipation. We saw this in the spring a decent amount. Remember that deep out cut? They ran that flood concept, Vince. Remember that? They were going in the press box because you were in the press box. They're going left to right. No, they're going left to right. And they ran a flood concept to your right, and they were coming to you in the press box. And it was just a go and then a deep out by Avery Davis. And Avery's kind of just getting into the top of his route, and Jack Coan's letting loose with the ball. Now, he doesn't throw a rope out there because you can't. If you throw a rope out there, the guy's not going to have time to get,
you have to get the guy
get to the ball.
He has to
so he kind of throws it out in space, and Avery turns around, finds the ball, and makes the catch.
Right.
And that was in the spring when they were 15 practices into working together.
Right.
So you see those kind of throws. And Vince, that's not just a throw we saw a lot. We saw him make that throw, especially on that corner route. Saw him make that a lot. That's the exact throw that I talked about Notre Dame needed to make on the first drive against Clemson in the ACC title game. They had that one-on-one corner route. You just had to throw the ball out to the sideline. The pressure was coming. You hit your drop. You throw the ball out to the sideline. Give Javon McKinley a chance. Hey, look, if it's incomplete, it's incomplete, right?
Right.
It's better than scrambling and throwing the ball away or taking a sack, right? Give your guys a chance, and that's something else that we're gonna talk about here, Vince. When you look at Jack Coan as part of this timing thing, so we're gonna talk about. We talked about decision making, right? We've talked about getting the ball out quickly. We've talked about being willing, being throwing with timing and anticipation. But the other part of that too is you've got to have the confidence in yourself and your teammates to make plays.
Exactly.
And that's not always something that we saw when things weren't necessarily up to par. And this is a great example here. I want you to watch, if you can see it, watch this running back. Now, this is their backup running back, okay? So this is not Jonathan Taylor. Let's keep that in mind. So check out this throw. This is not a, oh, wow, look at this great. It's just, okay, they're bringing a safety blitz. I know I got cover one. I've got my running back on this linebacker. Guys in pretty good coverage. I mean, that's kind of what you want a guy to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's really great coverage, actually.
Right. So what does Jack Coan say? Hey, I'm going to take a chance and give my guy an opportunity to make a play or not. And I'm going to put the ball where only my guy can catch it. And if he doesn't, it's incomplete. Live to fight another day. It's 2nd down and 4. We live to fight another day, right? If my guy catches it, then guess what? We score a touchdown. And that's exactly what happened. This is on the road against a top 10 team. This is a big-time throw. We saw him make the exact same throw in the Big Ten title game against Ohio State as well. In that game, however, the throw he made there, he was getting pressured, and a safety was coming over the top, and he just as he's about to get hit in the face, he lets the ball go.
Right.
And and I'm going to show the wide angle of this too here real quick, but you kind of just see like, hey, look, I got the coverage I want. Actually, that is Jonathan Taylor. My bad. I had another clip keyed up where it wasn't John. It was number 37. So that is Jonathan Taylor. But watch this. He sees where the coverage is. He knows where the safety is. I'm going to give my guy a shot.
And also, look at his head. Like, he's going through reads. Like, he scans the field here.
He's trying to find the safety. He's looking through his read. Okay, it's not there. It's not there.
He's looking at the safety. Boom.
Yep. Bam. Give my guy a chance to make a play.
And it was also enough to see 16 there, who was in man-to-man coverage, but he's still watching the quarterback to a degree. He gives him enough of a head fake to the left where he doesn't peel off of his guy to go help right away. Because if Jack Coan is eyeballing that running back the entire time, 16's peeling off, and he's going to go help. You know what I mean? So it's all about where his head is placed so that all the guys stay with who they're supposed to stay with, so it still stays a one-on-one situation. And
you don't think Kyron Williams can make that play?
I like Kyron Williams as a pass receiver better than Jonathan Taylor, to be honest with you. So
yes, Jonathan Taylor's a phenomenal runner, but Kyron Williams has a chance to be the best pass-catching running back in college football this year.
Absolutely.
And those are the kind of things where you like it. You've got Michael Mayer, you've got Kyron Williams, you've got Kevin Austin. If you're a quarterback that says, and we've seen, again, this isn't just a sampled clip from one particular game. This is a game against a top 10 opponent, but we saw this for all the time. That's why I brought up the Ohio State game. If you have a one-on-one, he's going to give you a chance to go make a play. He is. And that's a big part of what he brings to the table that we didn't always see. I would rather see that than a guy take off and scramble and hope that things work.
And I'd rather see an incomplete pass there than a scramble and everything else you just said.
Especially on 2nd and 4.
You know what? Because you first of all with the way Wisconsin's offense, we'll just keep it within that framework. With the way Wisconsin's offense runs, you've got Jonathan Taylor at 2nd and 4. That's when you take a shot. You take a chance because it's a pretty good chance that, and especially where they were on the field, you may be in 4-down territory. So you're telling me that they can't run and get 4 yards in 2 plays? I'm thinking they probably can. So you take your shot. You know, we just haven't seen that. We haven't seen that ability up to this point. that's one of the reasons I'm pumped for Jack Coan. You know, trying to temper my excitement, but it's difficult because I am very excited. I think he does bring a lot to the table. So
one part is because of the weapons that that Notre Dame
and
has.
You're right.
That's been the big frustration is people say, "Oh, Notre Dame doesn't have the playmakers." I would agree to that in 2020 because they lost so many.
Right.
You know, like
because Austin and Lindsey were both injured. And
Keys was sick half that you. So you lost some of that. I get it. I really do get it. Like last year, I somewhat understand it. But look, we saw in the Clemson game on November 7th, Ian Book was aggressive, attacking down the field, and Notre Dame early on, and Notre Dame moved the ball on him.
Right.
And that's something Notre Dame can do. And that's something Jack Coan has always shown a willingness to do. But here's the deal. If you're a 15 and in guy all the time, and the 3 throws that we showed, or the first 2 throws we showed were short, the last one was plus 20, but it wasn't like a true deep ball. It was a back shoulder. If you're 20 and in all the time, we'll do that. We'll go 20 and in all the time. Eventually, good teams are going to say, okay, you're not going to complete these crossers and these in cuts and these things. We're going to play aggressive. You're going to have to beat us over the top.
Right.
That is an underrated aspect. It's kind of funny. I was reading I'm going to have it up later, but Pro Football Focus ranked Notre Dame 11th on their preseason top 25. They had LSU ranked ahead of Notre Dame, which is just comical. But the quote was the quote from the guy that was like their main college football writer, who's just awful. The deep ball deprived Jack Coan. I just kind of laughed. And
he's not doing his homework, man.
This is an idiot. I hate to say that, but it's a disrespectful comment that's also not grounded in facts. I mean, again, look at the offense. But I think that's going to be the key. Jack Coan's going to have to prove that wrong for this offense really to play to its full potential. And that's something that you and I wrote an article about this several months ago where after diving into the film, I was like, wow, the deep ball at Notre Dame is going to get better this year. Number one, better deep ball weapons. In all due respect to Ian, in defense of Ian Book, he really only had one deep ball weapon last year in Javon McKinley. Ben Skowronek was not that guy. Michael Mayer was a true freshman. You didn't want to make him that guy. And so I'm sticking up for Ian a little bit here. That's a big reason why the deep ball wasn't as used last year. And Tommy Rees wisely realized, hey, look, we're just not a team that's going to be beating people post routes all day. And the deep balls they did use were like the outside one-on-ones to Javon McKinley. I'm good with that. But in past years, it hasn't always been the willingness to attack down the field at the quarterback position. And I think that's something that Jack Coan brings to the table. That's also something that I talked about in the Intel feature last night, is that something that we've now heard consistently is a lot of they're definitely being aggressive down the field.
Yes.
And although Jack Coan didn't throw the ball a lot down the field, he was very aggressive throwing down the field. And he was very accurate throwing down the field. And again, it comes down to intelligence and timing. And we're going to pull up a play here that we're going to walk through. So there's
the snow.
This is the third quarter against Wisconsin. It's a 10-7 ball game. This is a really you want to talk about why people have respect for Paul Chryst. So you can see the alignment here. It's a pro style system. This is 21 personnel. Remember that, right? So we've talked about personnel, 2 backs, 1 tight end, 21, and then 2 receivers. So before the snap, Wisconsin, you see the coverage here over here, right? You see the corner here, the safety here, linebacker. So they've got a nice little bracket here against the receivers who are in a reduced alignment. So right now, Minnesota's in a good situation. Well, Paul Chryst says, okay.
And reduced means closer to the line of scrimmage.
Correct.
By the way.
So then you bump out you motion out the fullback. Now all of a sudden, there's now 3 receivers and 3 guys, and now they're spread out more. So there's a little bit more of a window. So what you're going to see here is Jack Coan is going to get his eyes here and read that safety and watch how quickly he makes the decision and then attacks down the field. So he sees the read he likes, and he goes to it immediately. So again, gets the read, gets to the top of his drop, gathers, and lets it rip. He's already made his read, and the ball is out. Look how quickly he gets this ball down the field and over top of the defense with a very accurate throw. And this is he gets the ball, he throws it from about the 47, 48. Ball gets caught around the 15. That's not a 60-yard bomb, but it's over top of the defense because of how quickly he makes the read. The safety doesn't have time to get back over top.
It's a 40-yard throw in the air, though. I mean,
But the point is it doesn't have to be 60 yards to attack a team down the field if you're making quick decisions and getting the ball out.
And he made it in this weather.
Right. Look at all the snow. That's not ash from a volcano. That's just how snow looks. So watch it. So see what he has? First thing he does, watch him peek to the right away. Okay, that safety's off the hash. Here's the thing. Jack Coan knows he's coming back to his left. This is a lot like what Trevor Lawrence did to Notre Dame in the ACC title game. If you remember correctly, Notre Dame was in a cover one look. He had Kyle Hamilton in the middle of the field, which is actually smart defense by Notre Dame because you have your eraser in the middle. You can protect Sean Crawford in your other corners. Well, at the snap of the ball, Trevor Lawrence drops back, looks hard to his right to get Kyle Hamilton to jump, and it comes back to the seam to Amari Rodgers. He wanted to go left, but he had to peek and make sure that other side was not a threat, right? Trevor Lawrence was looking a guy off. That's not what Jack Coan's doing here, but the point is he knows where he wants to go, but he's got to make sure the defense is there. We did see him do that against Iowa on a deep ball. And they beat 3 top 25 teams in 2019, by the way. Iowa was one of them. And there was a play where he looks the safety off and bangs an outside go route, which is what Trevor Lawrence did. It's a little different here, but the point is he knows where he wants to go with the ball, but he's got to make sure that the backside defense, because the guy, Vince, on this particular play, this go route, the guy that could be the big threat is if number 11 takes off towards the middle of the field at the snap. He is now a threat to that seam route. So again, this is the route concept is you've got a sort of the smash concept we talked about down here. See, right? So they got the hitch and it's converted to an out, right? So that corner route, the quarterback is basically reading this safety. If this safety kind of sinks to the middle, then he's going to read the smash concept over here. So if the safety pedals hard or drops to the middle, then he's going to read the corner. And if he was going to that read, essentially what that would tell him is, what's this corner doing? Okay, so if the safety took that away, then he would bang the hitch here. Or if this safety back here came over, then he would read this and probably just bang the hitch route, right? Or if this corner came up, he'd throw the corner like he did before. The safety gets off the hash, and so he knows he has this number 3 seam against a linebacker. That's a matchup he likes, a receiver against a linebacker. But he's got to watch this, so he knows the concept he has. So who's the threat here? The threat to this concept is this safety to the right, to his right. So he's got to look and see that guy. He sees it, and as soon as he sees that guy open up kind of to his left, he knows that guy cannot get to the backside seam and gets his eyes right there. He knows where he's going, and his eyes get right on it. He hits his drop, gathers, and bam, ball's out right over the top.
That's a great touchdown. I mean, look, 41 is not going to be able to hang with 87. I mean, that's a matchup nightmare for Minnesota. I mean, he turns and he starts running and forget about it. He's not playing the ball. I mean, no.
Because I believe that's Quintez Cephas, who was a 6th-round NFL draft pick. So you get Quintez Cephas against a linebacker, that's a matchup you like. So again, that's intelligence, that's timing, that's accuracy, and that's a willingness and aggressiveness to throw the ball downfield. And we could throw other shots. Like I said, he took a deep one-on-one shot against Iowa in a one-on-one where he did look their safety off and attack down the field. I mean, there's plenty of shots of that. And then, of course, we saw him take shots for Notre Dame in the blue gold game. I think he had 4 balls that went beyond 20 yards past the line of scrimmage, including a really nice backside seam route to George Takis in that game. So that's the thing too, is I think that's the part that's going to surprise people the most, Vince, is his ability and willingness to attack down the field. And that's going to be important because, with all due respect to Wisconsin, he's going to have a level of speed on the perimeter that he did not have at Wisconsin. And if you can't utilize that, then you're not going to be as effective as a quarterback as we think he can be. And so that's a very important piece to what makes him, to me, a really effective football player, in my opinion.
Look, you and I are very high on what Jack Coan can do, and I think the coaching staff obviously is on board with what we think, because they wouldn't have named the starter as quickly as they did. And I also want to be clear, and you mentioned this in your intel piece last night. Yes, Jack Coan has seized hold of the quarterback position, but it's not because the other 2 guys weren't battling.
Right.
Because, look, Drew Pine
playing well.
Yeah, Drew Pine is having a great fall. I mean, he is, and he is a clear leader on the field. I mean, he's a clear leader. And
you said it in practice you've been. Like, he's a very well-respected. For a redshirt freshman who has, 2 career pass attempts, to be that well received by his teammates says a lot about the kind of young man Drew Pine is.
Right. He's greeting, Like, so for example, when they're like in individual drills, right, and then they come together as a team, right, he'll go and meet the linemen as they're coming to the team, and he's high-fiving everybody and you know, he's a leader. There's no question about it. And he's having a good, like I said, I was impressed with the way he was throwing the ball in one-on-ones and things of that nature. I really was. And of course, Tyler Buckner is an incredible athlete, and he's getting there too. He's just drinking out of a fire hose. And the intel piece obviously said he's really kind of upped his game the last few practices, which is fantastic. Last time we saw him was Thursday. And so look, again, it's not because of the other guys that Jack Coan is the quarterback. It's because of what Jack Coan is doing and how he has just harnessed everything that he needs to harness to be the leader and be the quarterback of this team is why they made the decision when they did. And so, like I said, I think that says more about Jack Coan than it does about anything else. And that's another reason why I'm excited about what he can bring to the table for this team.
So what is this going to look like, right, Vince? That's the final piece of this, is what is this going to look like for the Notre Dame offense? And here's some things I think that I want to see from the Notre Dame offense and see from Jack Coan schematically, statistically, things like that. I think that from a number standpoint, his numbers need to look a lot more like what Ian Book's looked like in 2018 when Ian Book was the starter.
As far as completion percentage and things like that.
You know, Ian was at like ended up at 68.2. He was over 70. I think it was like 8.9 in the regular season yards per attempt. We need to see minimum 8.5 from Jack Coan. We need to see minimum, you know, to me, 67, 68% from Jack Coan when it comes to overall completion percentage. Like I said, minimum 8.5 yards per pass attempt. I'd like to see it closer to 9. I think those are things we need to see. I'm okay if he throws some picks here and there, as long as it's because he's being aggressive. It's going to happen.
Yep.
And then the offense needs to be can remain still very good on third down. And the big thing is he's going to have to be good in the red zone. And obviously the running game is going to be part of that, but they're going to get into some situations where he's going to have to make some plays with his arm and his legs in the red zone. And those are things we're going to need to see. So, you know, for him specifically, it's the high completion percentage and the high yards per attempt. I want to see that. I want to see him taking at least 3-4 deep shots a game, and deep shots of not just the bombs, but like 20 plus. So when I say deep shots, I say 20 plus. I need to see at least 3 or 4 of those a game, and still maintaining the high overall completion percentage, the mid 8 at least yards per attempt. And again, I'd rather get closer to 9 on that. And then, of course, like I said, the offense as a whole, the red zone and the third down have to be really good.
Yeah, red zone's got to be better than it was last year.
But and they've got to maintain the success. Because I'll tell you one area where Ian Book was really good last year, was on third down.
Third down, absolutely.
Not just running, but throwing the ball.
Yeah,
that's when Ian was at his best. I mean, he made some really good throws last year. Him and Avery Davis and him and Michael Mayer were a really nice connection. And so that's an area where Ian Book, and again, Notre Dame had a top 10 third down offense last year.
Right.
And Ian Book's decision-making had a lot to do with that. Jack Coan's got to be able to match that. He's got to maintain that level of third. He's got to up the Notre Dame pass game in a lot of other areas where Ian Book did not perform well. But he's got to match Ian Book in the areas where Ian Book was good. And where Ian Book was at his best last season, in my opinion, was on third down, which is a really good time. If you're going to ever be at your best, that's a pretty good time to be at your best.
No doubt about it. Yeah, absolutely.
And that really fueled the offense last year. So I think to me, though, I don't know about you, Vince, but like those are the areas where, like, if I'm evaluating success, those are the 4 areas that I'm going to just kind of numbers wise evaluate Jack Coan.
Yeah, those are quantifiable numbers. I mean, you know what I mean? Like those are things that you can look at and see. And I guess, for me, the most quantifiable number is going to be the red zone for me. They really need to step it up there. And maybe it's not even going to be Jack Coan in the red zone. Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think it will be for the most part. But yeah, to your point, we'll see about that. But
and decision making is the other one. And I know that's less quantifiable. That's more, but.
Can I back up your statement there with a quantum? Like, so to me, the decision-making piece, Vince, is we're going to really know it in the bigger games. So what I don't want to see is him being at 8.5 yards per attempt or 9 yards per attempt because he was at like 12 against Toledo and against Navy. And he was at 7.5 against Wisconsin and Cincinnati and North Carolina and USC, right?
Right.
And I think that's where the decision-making piece comes into effect is if you're not a great decision-maker in those games, you're not going to be completing 65+% of your passes. You're not going to be averaging 8+ yards per attempt per pass play. Look, every quarterback in the country, his overall number is going to be a combination of where he is at the lower games, usually against the better teams, and where you are when you're playing crap teams that you dominate, right? And that was an issue that you and I had discussed in 2019 when you looked at Ian Book's overall numbers, 33,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, and you make the point that, like, look, 15 of those touchdowns came against New Mexico, Bowling Green, and Navy.
That's half.
And then you add another 8 more, which is like 23 touchdowns against Duke and Stanford. Well, only one of those teams had a winning record that year of the group, and it was Navy, And so it's like you had 23 of your 34 touchdowns came in 5 games against the worst teams on your schedule, right? So it's about the decision-making piece that you're rightly emphasizing, Vince, is going to manifest itself by what those numbers look like, yards per attempt, completions, third down, and red zone against the 4 best teams on your schedule, right? Cincinnati, Wisconsin, USC, North Carolina. And then in the road games, that's the other one, Virginia Tech, Virginia. It's going to be huge to get those things in those games. And then, of course, if Notre Dame is able to make the college football playoff again, or if they get to a big bowl game, how does he do in those games? That's going to be the key.
No question.
And he's going to have to perform at his best in those games where he didn't he battled in the Ohio State game. He battled in the Rose Bowl, but they weren't making a bunch of plays down the field in those games. And that's an area where he's going to have to perform better. I think the offense is going to help him. And I think his skill players in Notre Dame are going to better match up against those team skill players on defense than what he had at Wisconsin. When we talk about the pass game, again, running back, they had the best in the business, right? We're talking throwing the ball down the field. And Quintez Cephas is a nice player, but he's more Javon McKinley than he is Kevin Austin or Wayne Lindsey. So style of play wise, we're referring to. And so that's how I see it. So that's the Jack Coan era, Vince, and that's we're very excited about it. And it's not a surprise. We expected it to happen. I don't think anyone was really anticipating it not happening. But the concern was if the longer it took for him to be named the starter, the less effective he was being. Because with the experience, with all the tools, with all that, he should have separated himself early from Tyler Buckner, Drew Pine.
Right, absolutely.
That no matter how well they played, he's a fifth-year senior. And by the way, I did finally get clarification. This is his only year of eligibility remaining.
Okay.
So I was finally able to get someone to say, okay, talk to me about this.
Thank you. That's
this
awesome.
Is only year of eligibility. So that's what Jack Coan brings to the Notre Dame offense: intelligence, experience, timing, anticipation, guts, and the ability to attack the ball down the field. Now, if he's more athletic, like the Notre Dame coaches said he is, that's great. Because notice we didn't talk about any of that, right? We didn't talk about
we haven't seen
him running or any of that. We just haven't seen that. Now, I think where his foot quickness helps him is manipulating the pocket. Now, the one area that he's going to have to get better at relative to what we saw in film at Wisconsin, he had a tendency when he was trying to find someone downfield and nobody was coming open to hold on to the ball too long. He had about 3 plays that year where he got strip sacked from behind. That as I was breaking down the film, because there comes a point in time where I like the fact that you're gutsy and you're trying to hold on to make a play, but you can't. If guys aren't open, sometimes you just got to throw it away, take a sack, or check it down. Sometimes he would wait a little bit too long to go deep, and that would result. But if he cleans that up, Vince, then he's got a chance to have a really, really good season for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame has an offense has a chance to do exactly what you and I have been saying, which is take that next step and score a lot more points.
Absolutely. So that's going to do it for our breakdown of what Jack Coan brings to this Notre Dame team and why he was named the starter. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, that notification bell, so you know when we're going to be here. Now, during the week, 12:30 is going to kind of be our slot here for the foreseeable future. So make sure you kind of adjust things if you are able to make sure that you can catch us live. If not, of course, you can check out our podcast. You can check out our YouTube channel as well. And if you're listening in podcast land, make sure you subscribe and
give us a 5-star review.
And give us a 5-star review. Absolutely. So, Brian, I appreciate it. I am back to the salt mines. I will let you handle the Q&A, but everybody have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
All right. So that is it for the Jack Coan portion. So now let's dive into our Q&A today. And I am glad Demetrius Rex was in the show today. He is the one who yesterday said that we should do this kind of show. So I'm glad that he was able to make it. So I appreciate that, Demetrius. I'm glad you were able to join us. Irish for Life made it to the show. Let's kick off some questions and comments. Daniel Wade, starting off with, says, not looking forward to having Jack Coan be the only starter. Tyler Buckner needs significant field time this year. As I've said before, I don't disagree that Tyler Buckner needs to be on the field. I strongly disagree with not looking forward to having Jack Coan be the only starter. I think that you've said this before, and I respect it, but we're just going to have to agree to disagree on this one. Irish for Life says it will be nice to have a quarterback that uses the entire field. I am pumped for this season. This is my favorite time of the year because it's that excitement of what will be, what is this team going to be? What are they going to look like? How good are they going to be? And we're getting to that point in time where we're going to start finding out. There's no question about it. Jacob Hayden has a two-part question. Starts by saying, hey, Brian, you mentioned in an earlier episode of IB that you wouldn't be nervous if Jack Coan misses 6 to 8 deep balls, but more so if they didn't take those shots as well as not running RPOs. And then he says, do you think there's a chance Tommy hides those types of plays early in the season and saves them for tougher opponents? Is there a chance he does that? Sure. I would not like to see that because I would be more prone to being okay with that if you had a bunch of returners coming back. So guys that we've been able to do these things for games. I don't want Kevin Austin's first chance and Braden Lindsey's first chance with Jack Coan and Lawrence Keys and Avery Davis and Michael Mayer to really start saying, hey, we're going to stretch the field now, waiting until the Cincinnati game or the Wisconsin game. I don't want to see that. I'm a believer in just run your stuff. It doesn't, they're going to know you're going to attack deep. So what? Because you're not going to attack deep with the same stuff against them. You're doing what you need to do to beat Florida State. I don't think Notre Dame can hide that stuff against Florida State and Purdue. I think Notre Dame is certainly better than both of those teams by quite a bit, but I don't think they can just come out and run a generic dull offense just to not show stuff for Florida State or Purdue. I think that would be a bad idea. Plus, I think Jack Coan and the receivers and the line need to get an opportunity to get comfortable running the offense. That's a very important part of this. And if they're not being allowed to execute the offense to its full degree, then I don't know if they're going to have the rhythm necessarily to maximize their potential against a team like Cincinnati, who's the first of the big teams that they play, and then, of course, Wisconsin and so forth. And as far as what the first part of it, what I'm saying is that I'm okay. Look, there may be some misses early in the year. That tends to happen. But if they're not taking those shots, then those misses will then start coming later in the year when they have to take those shots. Look, come out early, take your shots, be aggressive. The timing may not be there right away. It may be there. We'll find out. But it may not be there. But what I don't want to have happen is that they're just not taking those shots. Because then also, even if you miss some shots, that can have an impact on the defense, especially if guys are open. You may miss a guy deep, so defensively, like, man, we caught a break there. Let's make sure that doesn't happen again. You're not just going to say, that guy can't complete a ball. You're just not going to see that, in my opinion. John Climax says Tyler will get there. No reason to rush it. Scheme some packages for him and continue to bring him along. Hearing encouraging things from practice is good stuff. Absolutely. John also responded to Jacob's comments, says he may hide some, but opening up the offense early helps build confidence, let future opponents pick their poison. I think that's a great way of putting it, John. No question. OC Irish fan says, gentlemen, since there is ample film on Jack Coan, why isn't he getting more positive comments from the talking heads? Could it be anti-Irish bias? It could be that, but, Kirk Herbstreit ripped a Notre Dame fan recently, which I didn't necessarily appreciate because, he's acting as if, like, people are not allowed to have a difference of opinion, and, like, he's never thought negatively of someone, and then somebody plays better and he changes his mind. So I was a little annoyed by that virtue signaling that Kirk Herbstreit was doing the other day, but he had very high praise for Jack Coan. So it's not everyone that feels that way. Honestly, what I think a lot of it is just lazy analysis. It just is. I mean, I read some of this stuff from Pro Football Focus about the top 25, and I'm just like, this person didn't watch half these teams play last year. He's just pulling up Pro Football Focus grades and all this other nonsense. And it's just lazy analysis. It's why some of these people rely so much on returning starters because they don't really know who else is coming along. So honestly, I think it has more to do with lazy analysis than it is anything about an anti-Notre Dame bias. Is that true of some people? Sure. But, I also think there's still a lot of people that still don't believe in Notre Dame, despite the fact they've done what they've done the last 4 years and have had to overcome personnel losses before. I think I think that has more to do with it. And again, as we've talked before, there was a reason why my initial reaction wasn't excitement when I heard that they were going after Jack Coan. It wasn't, because I casually watched Wisconsin. I never broke them down. I casually watched them on a Saturday as I'm getting ready for the Notre Dame game, or whatever the case may be. And you just don't see a lot of exciting things from him if you're just casually watching. It wasn't until I really broke down the film from an all 22 standpoint, was able to kind of look at all the different reads and the timing and the decision making, and you realize, boy, just how he was doing some complex reads at Wisconsin, and you watch him manipulate the safeties with his eyes and, come back like we showed on that throw against Minnesota. I don't really see that stuff when I'm casually watching the, oh, hey, look, had a one-on-one, took it, great ball. And then you study it and you go back and you watch it again. You watch the footwork, you watch the timing, you watch all those things. Then you're like, wow, this kid's a lot better than I thought he was. A lot of people don't have the time to do that, because a lot of these analysts aren't just covering Notre Dame. They're covering all of college football. They don't have time to sit down and do that, which I somewhat understand. So that's kind of where I think a lot of it is. I believe there's an anti-Notre Dame bias in some regards, but I don't want to be that person that, like, you see the boogeyman under every rock, right? Like every time somebody has a negative opinion of Notre Dame, oh, it's anti-Notre Dame bias. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just people that have an opinion that it's a legitimate opinion. I don't agree with it, but it's a legitimate, well thought out opinion. It just tends to be, not pro Notre Dame. And then other times it's just people arguing from a place of they just don't have enough knowledge to really comment on it, but their job is to comment on it. So they say things that don't make a lot of sense. So that's, it's different every time. Nicholas Grosh says, hopefully Coan can have a 1 year wonder years. Kevin McDougal in 1993. McDougal was an 11-1, beating number 1 FSU, and left the field with the Irish leading over BC. I still am hurt by that BC game. Coach Pat says, Coach, do you think Florida State players will be told to win one for Bobby Bowden? If so, will that have an emotional impact? I don't think it'll have an emotional impact with the players. I mean, Coach Bowden has been gone for a while from the program. And, I just look, this at the end of the day, when the game starts and the ball snapped, it's about the teams. It's about execution. It's about mentality. It's about mindset. It's about playing hard. It's about playing sound. It's about my players being better than your players. At the end of the day, I think all those things are going to matter more. Could Florida State have a little bit of an extra emotion for that game? I imagine they're going to do some tributes before the game. I think that'll be pretty cool. Do I think that it's going to somehow allow the Florida State players to play better or have more talent? I don't. But that's just, that's my 2 cents. I usually don't get too caught up too much into that stuff. Like I think about like the Purdue thing a couple of years ago. A lot of people attribute it to the kid that they brought in, the kid that was dying, but that kid had really connected with the program. They had him around. Like there was a personal connection to him that people could maybe point to and say that was the reason they played such inspired football. I don't know if the Florida State players kind of would feel that way. I don't know how well they knew Coach Bowden personally. Obviously, the legend. If you have any idea of who you are, and if you don't know the legend, then the people at Florida State aren't doing this whole football thing right. But I don't think it's going to be to the degree where it would impact the outcome of the game. Connor O'Doherty says, ask Coach, what is the situation with Brennan Clark right now? Where does he stand in the depth chart? I have not heard a thing about Brennan Clark other than when Vince has been at practice, he doesn't go through drills with the team. So it tells me that this is just 100% my guess. This isn't insight or intel or anything like that. But if he's not going through drills, it tells me he's not 100% yet. And I don't see him ever being a factor in the conversation at Notre Dame. And just he's missed too much time. You can't allow guys like Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner to get that far ahead of you because they're just too good for you to catch up and pass. Nicholas Grosh, a little bit of the tying everything together. So Kevin McDougal played in '93 because Ron Paulus broke his collarbone, right? Clavicle in preseason camp. So Kevin McDougal took over and led him to a great win. Well, now, obviously Ron Paulus was a freshman on that team. Now Ron Paulus' son is a freshman at Notre Dame, which number one is a cool story. Number two makes me feel really old. Notre Dame 2164. All hail the ultimate distributor game manager. Compliment, by the way, Jack Coan. All right, let's get down to some more questions. Jacob Hayden says, told my significant other last night, Notre Dame football might be the only thing I love more than her. I think that was a mistake. As someone who's been married 13 years, Jacob, I can assure you that was a mistake. But I think you can use it to your advantage. As I told you in the chat, I think you can say, you know what, after my comment last night, I really thought about it. And you know what, I do love you more than Notre Dame football, which has been my only true love my entire life. And the fact that I realize that I now love you more than Notre Dame football just speaks volumes about how deep my love is for you. And maybe buy her dinner because otherwise she's not going to let this one go probably. So you're going to want to come up with something with that. Chad Williams says, are you concerned with the slow release that Coan has? He has a good arm from film I've seen. However, the load to release is long and slow. Thoughts? I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all. Michael McKinley is in the show. Jonathan, where you been? It's been a while since I've tuned in. Sorry, gentlemen. Work has been a bit hectic, but I love that Jack Coan is the starter, proven winner who is confident and dependable. Go Irish. I agree. Jojo Pineda says, I hope Jack can use the whole field and push the ball downfield. And I'm hearing the wide receivers can produce also. Hope Coach Reese can get this offense more explosive and dynamic. And that's the thing that we talked about in our last two intel features is just how well the receivers are playing. And the thing that I talked about last night is, as I keep hearing more and more about all the plays the receivers are making, I'm going to be honest, my first response is, does that mean the secondary's playing poorly? And so that's what I kind of dove into this weekend talking to sources. I said, I flat out asked, I said, is this about the receivers are just playing that good, or is this about the secondaries maybe not as good as you thought? And I was told, like, no, that they're very happy with how I'm told the coaches are happy with how the defensive backs are playing for the most part. It's just, the quarterbacks are making great throws and the receivers are making great plays. And then, of course, there's just some guys that are just playing at a higher level on that side of the ball. So I don't think that it's somewhat eased my concerns, but I'm going to be honest, I'm still a little bit nervous about it. We'll have to kind of see how it plays out. But, I think this receiving core has a chance, if it can stay healthy, of being really good. John Erickson, this is some perspective. During the 1977 title year, Montana threw 11 TDs and 8 interceptions. Luckily for Joe, it was pre-internet, so his career was allowed to continue. Yeah, it's also a different era. I mean, the year that Tony Rice led Notre Dame to a 12-1 record, and I think a number 2 overall finish in the NCAA, and in the final rankings, he threw, and he was I believe that year he was a Heisman runner-up. He threw 2 touchdowns and 9 picks. So game is different. Offenses are different. Yeah, the year that Tony Rice led Notre Dame to a national championship, he threw, let me see here. Let me find his passing numbers. In 88, the year that Tony Rice led Notre Dame to a championship, he threw 8 touchdowns and had 7 interceptions. The next year, when Notre Dame was national runners-up and played, like, I think they beat 7 ranked teams that year, he threw 2 touchdowns and 9 interceptions and rushed for 7 touchdowns more, but he was a Heisman runner-up. Different game, different era. But it's always fun to kind of look back on those times and say, boy, imagine if Ian Book went through a season and only had 11 touchdowns and 8 picks. I mean, just imagine how that would be. So, yeah, pre-internet, but also different, totally different era. Chad Williams, must be a combined prep and lunch for Vince. Who gets an hour with no kids in school? Former teacher myself. Gotta have work smarter, not harder. Good on you, Vince. Yeah, so it's a prep period plus lunch. They've been able to combine it to where Vince has some time to do that. Plus, he's able to get a classroom. So I'm really, really excited to have him able to make this a regular thing. I wish he was able to be around for the questions, but yeah, this is better than nothing. Matt Romero says Notre Dame gets dropped on the rankings for losing pieces of the team. Then Cincinnati gets ranked higher when one of their best pieces leaves for Notre Dame. I get what you're saying there. You're talking about Marcus Freeman, but that's kind of washed by the fact that Notre Dame also lost their defensive coordinator. But I think the pieces most of these analysts care more about are the pieces on the field. And Cincinnati returns, I think, like 19 or 20 starters. The other part of it is they're putting a lot of hype on that loss to Georgia and how close that loss was. And so they're getting a lot of love. I mean, we'll see. I guess we'll find out. We'll see it play out on the field, but I certainly would not have Notre Dame behind Cincinnati. Certainly would not. Chad Williams, second part of the question on Coan. I'm not convinced that he can make consistent throws off platform. Just what I've seen from his time at Wisconsin and little film from camp and spring game. Thoughts on that also? Again, I don't agree with you. I mean, we just kind of showed you a play where he had to speed up his delivery and get the ball out. He's not going to be a guy that's going to run to his left, turn his hips, and throw the ball 60 yards down the field. That's just what not many quarterbacks can do that. I think a lot of the off-platform stuff gets a little bit overplayed. You know, it's the new term that everybody likes. I need a guy that can step in the pocket, that can climb the pocket and let go with the ball. I need a guy that can speed up his release and hit the check down with the pressure coming in his face. We just showed you him doing that in the breakdown. I think that's who Jack Coan is. He's not going to make some of the throws that Trevor Lawrence made. Who else is? There's not many people that can do that. Mac Jones didn't make a ton of those throws. So I just don't see what you're saying. I respect the fact that you feel that way and you've watched the film. I definitely appreciate the fact that you've come here from having watched film. I just don't see what you see. I see a guy that is accurate. I see a guy that does have a quick delivery when he needs to, but a guy also that has impeccable timing and anticipation. And if there is a slow release, which again, I don't agree with, I would say that the fact that he does have such great timing would negate any of that. And Chad asks, so the Notre Dame offense will showcase Coan's skill more than at Wisconsin. Yes, I believe that. Absolutely. Michael Johnson with a good thought on how Notre Dame is viewed. Says Notre Dame has been getting disrespected by everyone, but not looking at Notre Dame as a whole. Other teams get credit for recruiting. Notre Dame doesn't get that same respect. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of assumptions about Notre Dame's recruiting that are inaccurate and lack context. Well, Notre Dame hasn't recruited like Alabama and Clemson. Well, neither has Cincinnati or Iowa State or North Carolina or other teams like that who are getting far more benefit of the doubt about who Notre Dame is. Richard Robinson says Coan will be great. Irish have a lot of weapons offensively. You can see 30 TD passes for. Can you see 30 TD passes for Coan? It's possible, but again, part of that is how many of them are big plays. Part of the reason Ian Book threw 34 touchdowns in 2019 was he had a lot of big plays. I mean, you think of the little jet sweep he threw to Avery Davis against New Mexico that went for a 50-some-yard touchdown. The little crossing route he threw to Javon McKinley that same game that he broke a bunch of plays, went for a touchdown. He had deep balls to Chase Claypool and things like that. Braden Lindsey had a couple deep touchdowns in that season as well. So I think a lot of that is, can the receivers make a lot of big plays? But the other part is how good is the red zone run offense? Could maybe bring the touchdowns down a little bit. But as long as the red zone efficiency is up, I don't care if it's Jack Coan completing a pass to get it to first and goal at the 3 and they run it in, as long as it's just getting in, I think is the big thing for me. So that could somewhat bring the 30 touchdown passes down, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was over 30 passes to be on touchdown passes. Anthony L says, Anthony L, BD, your analysis and data is why I'm here. Has fall practice given you any inclination that Kelly is relinquishing game plan and strategy control to Reese? So I don't have that particular answer. Vince was at practice, and what Vince said is that, Vince is, because I haven't been in any practices, but Vince has been to the open practices so far. We'll have another one tomorrow, and then we'll have a full scrimmage or full practice, I believe, on Thursday is what we'll have access to. But what Vince says, unlike past years, Brian Kelly's been way less involved in the offense at practice. It backtracks with what we've kind of been told this offseason, which is, Tommy Rees is being allowed to run the show. Tommy Rees and the offensive coaches are being allowed to run the show. And I'm also told that Tommy Rees has a very strong relationship with guys like John McNulty, with Lance Taylor, with Dell Alexander. There's a lot of respect there. So it's not just him kind of doing it by himself. It's him working with the rest of the coaches, which is a positive. But it's Brian Kelly allowing the coaches to coach. Now, the question is, Anthony, will that continue if they get into the season and let's say they don't have a game that goes quite as well? Let's say they don't move the ball, they don't score a ton. Will Coach Kelly then be willing to say, hey, look, we're going to keep it going? Because every team has those days. Or will he then say, okay, I'm going to step in and do more and be more involved now? So hopefully that doesn't happen, but that would be my one concern. I got bumped down a little bit, so I did lose some questions. So I'm going to get to Chad's question here. If you ask something beforehand that I haven't been able to get to, or that I skipped, it's because I got bumped. I'm not purposely skipping your question. Feel free to throw it back in to the bottom of the chat, and we'll discuss it. Okay, so let's get to some questions here. All right, so Chad Williams asks, I want him, Jack Coan, to be able to hit the seam also, Mayer or the slot receiver. I think obviously the tight ends are key. I think the number 2 tight ends are also part of that. The backs are key to that as well. I do think that's a part of the offense that has been missing, is Notre Dame's willingness to really attack from about 2 yards outside the hash and in with the pass game, especially the intermediate to deep pass game. We've seen the short stuff, work relatively effectively. But the deep pass stuff, to me, is where we need to see more of that, and that's kind of that to me is going to be a key part of this offense, no question. Nita Walsh says, Book went 266 consecutive attempts without an interception. Was this great quarterbacking or a sign that he was too cautious? I think it was more about a concern, because he threw a pick against Duke in the opener, and then he didn't throw another interception until the Syracuse game. And then he threw another one against Alabama. I think it was, number one, about playing a pretty weak schedule. We've talked about this. Pretty weak offense. They didn't play very many good defenses last year. I think it's about his receivers made some good plays, which every quarterback needs. But then it was conservative offense, and he didn't take a whole lot of shots. And when he did take shots, it was one-on-ones, and he was just putting the ball in good place. So, I mean, part of that is good quarterbacking. When he did take shots, he was accurate with it and made some really good throws to Javon McKinley down the field against North Carolina, against Clemson on November 7th. Made some of those throws, but a lot of it was just an unwillingness not to attack down the field. And I think that's something that you look at and say that has to get better. You have to be more aggressive throwing the ball down the field, especially when you're playing a schedule that doesn't have a lot of great pass defenses on it, and a lot of great defenses, period, on it. And, last year you look at it, Ian Book threw, according to Pro Football Focus, and this is the one thing they do well, is Ian Book he only threw 41 deep balls or throws beyond 20 or more yards all season, which is an average of like 3. And you could go back and look, a lot of those came in some of the games against some of the lesser opponents. He threw a total of 122 passes that went at least 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. Well, if you compare that to other quarterbacks, that's nowhere close to what, in my opinion, where you need to be. I mean, you look at Mac Jones, for example. He threw, I'm trying to do the math in my head here. He threw 400. See here, let me get down to the zones. He threw 157 passes that went at least 10 yards down the field. And again, Ian Book threw, doing the math here, Ian Book threw 122. But 81 of those were intermediate compared to 41 deep balls. You go to Mac Jones, and he threw 157 while playing fewer overall snaps and a much higher completion percentage. And he threw 56 deep balls, 101 intermediate throws. So obviously there's a significant, I mean, it's like 50, so like 30, 40 throws, right? I mean, that's a pretty big difference. And so I think it's one of those things where Notre Dame's going to have to be more aggressive, but it's also about being more efficient too. It's not just about being aggressive. You have to be more successful with it. And of those 41 deep balls, Notre Dame only completed, I think it's something, I'm gonna have to look it up here. This is like 14 or 15 is all that they completed. I'm going to say it was 16 is all that they completed. So you're talking about a 39% completion percentage, where other quarterbacks were, in the around 50 for the deep ball and in the 60s on the intermediate. So those are the things that you're going to have to see better production on the deep balls. And that's something where Jack Coan was more effective. So as I said, Ian Book last year, for example, completed 39% of his passes on throws of at least 10 yards, right? And then 51.9% of his throws on passes between 10 and 19 yards. And I'm just going to compare this real quick to what Jack Coan was in 2019. Jack Coan, I believe, was closer to 50% on deep balls. Yeah, so on deep balls that year, Jack Coan was at 50% compared to Ian Book's 39. On throws of 10 to 19 yards, Jack Coan completed 61.1% of his passes. So he was well over 50% on deeper throws. And obviously that's where you want to be, where Ian Book was 39 on deep and 51.9 on short to intermediate. Jack Coan was almost 10 percentage points better on intermediate, and he was 11 percentage points better on completion percentage on deep balls. Well, the higher completion percentage you have, the fewer of those plays you're going to have to throw. And that factors into it as well. And so you look at, obviously, like, as I mentioned, Alabama's downfield completion percentage last year was just insanely good. I don't expect Jack Coan or Ian Book or anybody else to complete rates that high. Mac Jones is at 58.9% on deep balls, 20 plus, and he was at 71.3 on 10 to 19. That's an insane number. But if you look at Trevor Lawrence, for example, I'm going to pull Trevor Lawrence up from 2019 here real quick. Trevor Lawrence was at 43.1% on 20 plus, which is lower than Jack Coan's 50%. Now, he threw more, and then he was at 57.3% on 10 to 19, which is about 4 percentage points lower than what Jack Coan was that year. And so I think those are things, when I look at it, I say that's pretty good success. And even the year before, 2019, Trevor Lawrence was 41.4% on deep balls, 57.5% on intermediate throws. That's 10 to 19. Again, Jack Coan was better in both areas. You go back and look at 2018. Again, Trevor Lawrence, 42.4%. Jack Coan, 50, and then on intermediate, on deep balls, 57.1 on intermediate. Again, it was Jack Coan with a better completion percentage. Again, fewer throws, but I would make the case that sometimes fewer throws can be worse because you're not getting as many opportunities. And so I think his numbers stack up pretty favorably. And you look at Justin Fields from 2019 when he had a phenomenal year, 41 touchdowns, 3 picks. Justin Fields was 46.2% on deep balls, lower than Jack Coan. He was higher than Jack Coan on intermediate, 70.6, which is a phenomenal number. And obviously, I'd like to see him get see Jack Coan get even higher on the 10 to 19. I'd like to see him get to 65 or so percent. And then you look at Justin Fields in 2020. He was much better on deep balls. I mean, he put up just stupid numbers on deep balls this past year. But his intermediate was 67.8. That's a little closer to where I would want Jack Coan to be, in my opinion. So again, there's a lot of ways to look at it. I think a big part of it is the fact that Notre Dame just didn't throw a lot of shots down the field. And when Ian Book did, he was very cautious about it and just didn't take, in my opinion, enough chances. And those are areas where he needs to get a lot better. Here's another example. Kyler Murray in 2018, the year he won the Heisman, was 49.4% on his deep balls. That was lower than Jack Coan's. And then he was 66.7 on his intermediate. Jack Coan was over 61. So he was higher there. But I think that's an area where there is still room for Jack Coan to continue to improve. Part of that's going to be scheme. You have to have a better scheme. I don't think Wisconsin always had the greatest scheme to really create openings on some of the crossing stuff. A lot of it was downfield, a lot of high lows, a lot of vertical stretches, not as many horizontal stretches. And I think that's something that could open things up a little bit for Jack Coan as well. Tatted Up Irishman says, "What up, guys? Brian, before watching you in Vince, I was very much on the Buckner bandwagon. You guys have convinced me that Coan can be a legit option. Thanks for all your hard work. I appreciate that." And look, Tyler Buckner's time will come. I mean, look, my opinion of Tyler Buckner has not changed. If anything, how well I'm hearing he's doing in fall camp has only improved my opinion of Tyler Buckner, who I graded as a top 50 recruit, despite the fact he never played as a senior and missed his sophomore year. So the talent is there. It's just now we got to give him time to develop. And it's also about the fact that Jack Coan, I think, can be pretty good. And if he ends up not being as good as I think, then you bring Tyler Buckner along and he'll get his shot. But I think Jack Coan could be a really good player. And I appreciate your open-mindedness to that conversation. Zach Thies says, finally have a quarterback that will stand in the pocket with some pressure and make a throw. I believe he will. Michael Johnson says, since Jack is getting the ball out quickly, are the receivers going to be ready to receive the ball? Yeah, I think so. I think that's part of the offense that they're bringing in, Michael. It's a very good question. You know, in past years, the RPOs, the quick game, the screens, those weren't super big parts of the offense. It was a more, you know, intermediate type of thing, and then they would have some crossers and things like that, and they would. But as far as just the real fast throws, not a lot of that. But I think there is going to take some getting used to sort of the ball getting into them so quickly on some of those intermediate to deep throws, which we didn't often see at Notre Dame. I think that's where you're going to see you're going to have to see an adjustment. But from what I understand, they've been doing pretty well with it, because receivers usually like that kind of stuff. Give me the ball sooner so I can have space to do something with it. That's what most receivers want. Nolan Esparza says, with Coan being a different kind of pass in the book, does that mean the receivers have to approach the game differently? Does it require a different technique? This kind of follows up with Michael's question. Both are good questions. I don't think the receivers have to use different technique. I think what it means is when you get to the top of your break, you need to get your eyes around quickly and find the football, because it's going to be getting there in a hurry. But again, that's something receivers like. If I'm Braden Lindsey, I want you to get me to the ball as soon as I have a step. Get me the ball. Don't give that DB time to close on me. Because if you can get me the ball in space, if you can get me the ball quickly before that DB can get on me, I'm going to do something with it. You're going to feel the same way for Kevin Austin. You're going to feel the same way for Michael Mayer. You're going to feel the same way for Avery Davis or Lawrence Keys or Kyron Williams or Chris Tyree or Joe Wilkins or Xavier Watts or anybody else. It's get me the ball quickly. They want that, but is there going to be an adjustment period for that? Yeah, I think there will, but that's kind of already happened. Not only did they have 15 fall practices, but these guys throw the ball to each other a lot in working out together, and I'm pretty sure that they've made that adjustment by now. And I think that's also why we're hearing so many things about the receivers playing so well so far and how well Jack Coan is playing. Is it tells me that they're already on a connected page that you often don't really hear about until the second, third week of fall camp. So we're already hearing it, 8 practices in. It's a great sign for Notre Dame. Liam Gaming says, hit the like button. Yes, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. If you're listening via podcast, make sure you're subscribed and you give us a 5-star review. Thank you for the reminder, Liam. DJ Wilson says, in that play that they just showed, Coan looks right first, linebacker move that way, have a linebacker, corner, and safety bite on the throw on a throw right. That's good quarterbacking. Sean Hunter is fired up today. We are Notre Dame. Cannot wait for the season. Big things coming. I hope you're right. Hope you're right. Nolan says, as confident as Coan already is, I can't even imagine how confident he will be with Kyron pass blocking. That guy would stand in front of a freight train if it was trying to sack his quarterback. Yeah. You're not wrong. Alan English says, I just finished watching Rudy with my 8-year-old son for the first time and figured this is one of the only groups of people who could relate to how big of a fatherly moment it was. Go Irish. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people in here that can relate, Alan. I appreciate you sharing that. No doubt. It's a great story. Brandon says, can't wait for Jack Coan to prove everyone wrong. A lot of people seem to think he's just a game manager, but fail to realize that's because he was running an offense at the University of Wisconsin. See, you kind of made our point. You said everyone thinks he's a game manager. When did that become a negative? When did being a game manager all of a sudden become like a weakness? I'll never understand that. It's like I've had to invent terminology just because if I say game manager, people immediately just assume he, yeah. So whatever. We'll find out. Brandon says, I think Coan can become much more. Michael Johnson says we should see a lot of loaded boxes to stop the run, and your wide receivers should have a big year. I agree. Mike Gardner says, who else is just excited about the possibility of seeing tight ends catching seam routes? I don't think you're alone. I don't think you're alone. I think David Knight, I assume that David's response is to you. But yes, Sean Hunter, 100% excited to see our amazing tight ends get it. No question. Jonathan says, I just wish Coan could start for us in 2021. Also, the idea of Buckner's first career, I think you mean 2022. The idea of Buckner's first career start being against Ohio State is going to make me a nervous wreck. I'm sure that is true, but look, if you have enough confidence in who Tyler Buckner is and the talent he'll have around him, yeah, I wouldn't be nervous. And again, that game is not going to define that season. It's the opener. He'll be okay. Peter Torres with the super chat. I am sorry, Peter. I did not see this earlier. I apologize, but Peter Torres says finally a healthy Kevin Austin to help Coan. As long as he can stay healthy, that's obviously going to be real important. But I think that's, to me, is a big piece. If you can kind of have multiple security blankets, obviously Michael Mayer's going to be one. I think Kyron Williams can be one out of the backfield. And then, of course, if you get Kevin Austin too, that's going to make a quarterback real confident and comfortable in sitting in the pocket and being able to make throws. This is what he said. I just wish Coan had another year of eligibility so he could be our starter in 2022. So I get you. Sorry about that, Jonathan. I did not see your follow-up. But, yeah, I get you. Ladarius Martin in the chat. Hey, Irish fam, y'all killing the recruiting. There's no question Notre Dame is on fire right now in recruiting. Just obviously yesterday got another 4-star, top 250, 2,000 recruit in Adon Schuler. Andrew Goss says, I like playing Ohio State first game. Gives him an opportunity to play a top team and really see things the other teams can't provide, in my opinion. I like the way you look at it. I like the way you look at it. David Knight says, losing to Ohio State will not be tragic if they keep it competitive. Agree. Chad Williams says, no checkdowns unless it's a 2-minute or it's a drop 8 coverage. Yeah, I think there's got to be a happy medium between what we saw in the past and that. Look, to me, when you've got Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree, if guys aren't open or you're unsure of if the guys are going to come open, then dump it off. But don't miss out on don't not have the guts to take chances down the field because you're going to dump it off. But when you've got guys like Chris Tyree and Kyron Williams, you'd be a fool not to check it down from time to time if things aren't there. Not just in 2-minute or drop 8, but sometimes teams cover you well. I mean, sometimes, especially when you're playing Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, they're going to cover you well. So get the ball in space to your playmakers and let them go do something. And if they don't, then you drop it. And Chad, I think I know where you're coming from on this, and I understand. I'm sympathetic. I mean, when Vince and I would be watching practices, it's kind of where I started using the phrase, and I know I'm not the only one that says that, but I started calling the quarterback, captain check down, right? Because it's like you'd be in practice, it'll be like 6-7 straight plays where it's like you just check down, and it's like you had this guy, you had that guy, but it's like read, check down. I don't want to see that. But sometimes if you go through your reads and that pocket's starting to collapse and guys aren't open, or sometimes it's hey, I think this corner route can come open, but the receiver got jammed at the line. He's not getting to his break on time, so that ball's not going to be there. Check it down. There's a time and a place for that. It's just you got to make sure that you're not sacrificing other opportunities to hit those checkdowns. Chad Williams says, Bobby Bowden philosophy, 2 deep throws a quarter. I dig it. I dig it. Mike Huff says, I think Jack Coan is going to have a solid year, 20 touchdowns. I hope he throws more than that, though. I'll be honest with you. I hope he has more than that. Chad Williams says, yeah, if Coan only has 20 passing TDs, it will not be a good offensive season. I agree with you, Chad. I think the obvious exception is, a bunch of these balls get like inside the 10 and they just pound it in, and, the running backs run for 30+ touchdowns or something. But yeah, I tend to lead towards you. If they only have, unless he misses games, if he plays a full season and only has 20 touchdown passes, I'll be a little disappointed. I will. I'll be a little disappointed. And I'd be a little surprised. I'd have to have some, there'd have to be some, I'd have to see some things like that would help me justify it. But just like right now with no context, I'm with you, Chad. I don't think that would be a great sign, in my opinion. Irish for Life says, Coan has the ability of revolutionizing our offense. Getting our talented receivers on the field will be awesome. Chad Williams says, agreed, Andrew. Chad Williams says, agreed. 30 touchdowns is the benchmark for me, passing touchdown-wise, and I would agree with that. Chad says 3,300 yards is my benchmark for passing yards. Again, the I tend to be with you on that, Chad. I'd say the exception would be is if, like, they're blowing a lot of teams out. He's not playing, deep into the second half very often, that kind of thing. But I don't see them having that many blowouts to where he's not playing in the second half. Or, of course, if there's an injury. But assuming health and a normal season, I think at least 3,200, 3,300 yards is the minimum for me of what I expect from this pass offense. And then, of course, about, to me, I don't know if I wouldn't say 30 is the benchmark, because I could see 25 plus being the minimum for me. Because, again, I could see situations where, you get it inside the 10 and your guys are just really good at running it in. I could see something like that. But 25 is the minimum for me in touchdown passes. And then I'd say about 32 to 3,300 yards would be my minimum for passing yards. Tom M. said, I said this for 3 years. Notre Dame will never beat a top 10 team at full strength with Captain Dink and Dunk. At quarterback, it should have been Phil J. I was absolutely correct. I don't disagree with your premise, but I think that's the reason, a big reason that Notre Dame did beat a top 10 team last year in Clemson, is because early in the game, Ian was aggressive, attacking downfield, hitting Tommy Trumbull down the field, hitting Javon McKinley down the field on 2 deep balls that were huge parts of that game. And then he got away from that. The offense sputtered, and then he got back to it in the fourth quarter on that last drive, and it worked. He had the ability. He just didn't have the willingness at times. And, yeah, I tend to agree. Jonathan says, I'm a huge Bears fan, so I do love Justin Fields. That's about it, though. Talking about, there were a lot of Ohio State, anti-Ohio State stuff in the chat today, which I'm all for. Ladarius Martin says, do y'all think Jack Coan can have a Jacob Coker type of year? I would hope that he would have a better year than Jacob Coker had, Ladarius. And the reason I say that is when you go back and look at Jacob Coker back in 2015, he played 15 games, only threw for 3,100 yards and 21 touchdowns and 8 picks. That is not ideal for where Notre Dame should be. Now, of course, in the postseason, you'll remember he had great postseason play. Threw for 286. I'm looking at it now. Threw for 286 against Michigan State, 2 touchdowns, completed 83% of his passes. Against Clemson in the title game, 64% of his passes for 335 yards and 2 scores. So he did obviously a lot more in those games, but he didn't do a whole lot during the season. I mean, it was a pretty mediocre offense during the season, passing wise. It was just kind of don't do anything stupid, because you had such a great running game on that team. And so, to me, Notre Dame's going to have – Derrick Henry for 2,200 yards and won the Heisman Trophy. They're going to need Jack Coan to make a lot more plays with his arm than Jake Coker had. Now, I think Notre Dame fans are hoping that he'll have a Jake Coker type of year in regards to how the team finishes that year. Obviously, Jacob Coker was a quarterback for a team that won the national championship, but I think for me, it's going to be it's going to have to get more production, and it's going to be a different type of offense, in my opinion. Destin Reese says, I wanted Buckner as a starter. His time will come. His time will come. Let's get some more here. Chad Williams, a very good observation. Coaches don't hide plays. They hide wrinkles within those plays. For the most part, you're correct. I think you have to run your offense. I think there are always different wrinkles you're going to show, but you don't not throw the deep ball because you're going to play a team. There may be a concept you like versus Cincinnati that you don't run in other games, but you're still going to throw the post. You're still going to throw the back shoulder. You're still going to do all those type of things. It's very good analysis. Omar Austin says, no disrespect to the Wisconsin receivers. If Coan has the cojones to throw it up and give those guys an opportunity to make a play, he must be having a field day now. I would agree. Jojo Pineda says, hi guys, question. I'm hearing that On3 is going to take over or push rivals out. This is a ranking site. Have you heard of them? I was looking at the 2023 rankings for future Irish recruits. Yeah, On3 is basically, it's the newest endeavor by Shannon Terry. Shannon Terry started Rivals, built it up, sold it for a lot more than he spent to make it. Good businessman. Went and did the same thing at 24/7, created it, built it up, kind of looked at some of the areas they needed to be different and better than they were at Rivals, built it up, obviously sold it for a lot more money, and now he's doing the same thing at On3. I think this is going to crush Rivals. They're going to lose a lot of team sites. They're going to lose a lot of team sites from the big schools, and their national recruiting staff already stinks. And I have a feeling they're going to lose some more of those guys, and On3 is just going to raid Rivals, in my opinion. And Rivals is, I don't know if they'll get pushed out, but they're going to diminish even more, in my opinion. I don't love the rankings I've seen from On3. They've had some rankings that are pretty, to me, egregious. You know, you've got Joey Tenona as the number 32 player in the country, but CJ Williams isn't even a top 300. I love the fact they had Keon Keeley ranked 18th, but then Brendan Vernon's not in it at all. So I don't love it so far, but you know, look, they're trying to make a splash, trying to make a name, and there's some guys that are working for that site that I respect and are going to do, you know, work hard, and I appreciate that. But yeah, they're gonna hurt Rivals a lot, in my opinion. Rivals is dying a slow death, and I think On3 is going to help speed that up a little bit. Liam Gaming, if a young receiver gets into the rotation, he will have a limited number of routes. Does this affect the routes of the other receivers during the player series? No. So essentially the way it works is, Liam, and this is a great question. So what it means is when you get into the game, when you put him in the game, there's a certain number of calls that you have as a coordinator based on where he's lined up that you know he can run. So what you're doing is you're just calling plays that incorporate that concept. So if a guy's, you know, runs a really good corner route, then you're going to put him in and, you know, run your smash concepts or run some of your high lows or maybe a flood concept where you kind of use that ability to run that route. If a guy's, you're really good in the quick game, you're going to run quick game concepts. He's got to understand spacing and timing and all that kind of stuff. But it's just putting him in the game for calls that you know he can execute. But then obviously the other players can execute the other aspects of that call. So it doesn't really hurt the other receivers as long as they're doing what they need to do. Then it shouldn't hurt them too much at all. Let's get to some more questions. Benjamin says, notice a big difference in Brian Kelly and Tommy Reese, and I think Jack is hungry. Could this be the year for Notre Dame? Your thoughts? Benjamin, look, I'm trying not to jump on like the Homer bandwagon and come across as like a, you know, big-time Homer guy. But the one thing I've said all year, and I'm going to have an article about this, we'll have a podcast when we get closer to the season about this, but I do think Notre Dame has a better shot this year than some people think. Not just because I expect Notre Dame to be better than people think Notre Dame is going to be, but you've got Ohio State's replacing their starting quarterback, and whoever starts is going to have 0 career passes. Alabama lost a ton, lost 6 first-round draft picks. I know they reload, but they lost 6 first-round draft picks. They have a quarterback that's never really played a meaningful down. Incredibly talented, but never played a meaningful down. Clemson's playing a young quarterback. They lost the greatest player in their school's history. They lost the greatest running back in their school history, and they lost their top 2 receivers from last year and their only good offensive linemen. So it's kind of like 2017 where that to me was one of the lower, that was not one of the least effective Bama teams that they had, but it won a title because other teams were down. Clemson was down. That was the Kelly Bryant year, you know. Oklahoma lost a couple games early in the season, and so they were down. I think that was the year they lost to Houston early. Oh, no, let's see. I'm trying to remember. They lost to Houston because Oklahoma had 2 losses that year in 2017 that knocked them out, and I'm trying to remember what. No, that they actually made it that year. 2017's year that was a really good Oklahoma team. I'm trying to Ohio State. That's what I was thinking of. Ohio State lost to Iowa. And then lost to Oklahoma because Oklahoma beat Ohio State that year, so they were not as good. Georgia was good, but not a great team, you know. And so, but it just was one of those years where a Notre Dame team could have made a run, and you need that right now. Again, you need those teams that kind of be dragged down a little bit, and for Notre Dame to come up. And so that's why I think on an outside chance, yeah, they have an outside chance to win it this year. Am I predicting it? No, they have a lot to prove still. But do I think this, you know, if the stars align, could this be a team that's capable of playing toe-to-toe and beating those teams? Yeah, I really believe that it is. John Klimek agrees. Coan has to be better than Coker. Coker was like 3,000 yards and 20 TDs. Yeah, it was 3,121, and that was in 15 games. Craig Seaburn, I think you should show. This is back to the question about, will they hide things? I think you should show your stuff and make the other teams watch more film. And when you are in control, run a fake punt to make other teams worry about what they may face. That's always kind of been my philosophy. But, that's just, I think it's kind of personal preference. But I'm with you, Craig. That's kind of always how I felt. Like, look, give them a lot to think. And sometimes even if you're playing a bad team, give them a little bit more to think about. Maybe you run screens more than you normally would, or maybe you run a couple reverses, or, a throwback screen or something like that. Maybe you're a little bit more gimmicky in some of those games against like Toledo and Purdue, just to have some fun, empty your bag of tricks a little bit, just to get those teams thinking about it. That's certainly something that I've seen teams do. And depending on the makeup of my team, I would probably do. Ladarius asks, Brian, if a team makes the college football playoff for the first time ever, who do you think has a chance to make it? Okay, so a couple teams that I've thought about that have a shot to get in this year, maybe for the first time ever. If you buy the hype with Texas A&M, which I don't buy the hype. I think their defense is going to be really good, and I love Spiller at running back, but they lost 4 starting offensive linemen and a quarterback, and they don't have the replacements that in place that Notre Dame does, and they don't have the receiving core that Notre Dame does. But there's a team. Look, Oregon, I think, is the team that can maybe get in. They've got a chance early in the year playing at Ohio State. If they're able to upset Ohio State or just be in a really good competitive game and then run the table in the Pac-12, I think Oregon could have a shot to get in. And now, again, it wouldn't be their first time ever because they got in 2014. So I'm sitting there, they haven't been in a while. I kind of forgot about 2014, them getting in. Iowa State's a team getting a lot of love. I don't see that. I don't see them winning the Big 12. I think ACC-wise, I don't see Miami or North Carolina being good enough to make a run. I think maybe an SEC West team could kind of sneak in there and take advantage of Bama losing a lot and get in. So that's what I say, like A&M. But Georgia's been in before. I don't see Texas making that kind of run. I don't see USC making that kind of run. I don't see Penn State making that kind of run. Those would be teams that you look at and say, if there was a team from that league, it'd be that team. I just don't see those teams making a run. So I don't know if we'll see a new team this year. I think it may be a team we haven't seen in a while, and that's like Oregon, because I can't believe I forgot that they got in 2014. So we may see a thing like that, but I don't see a Washington this year because, remember when Washington made it in 2016, kind of came out of nowhere. I don't see a Michigan State like we saw in 2015 kind of sneaking in. I just don't think there's a Big Ten team like that. I think the gap between Ohio State and the rest of those teams is just so great that if Ohio State doesn't make it, nobody in the Big Ten is going to make it. I don't see Wisconsin having that kind of year, although Wisconsin has a shot. I mean, if Wisconsin beats Notre Dame and has only one loss and then beats Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, they'll get in my opinion. But I don't see them doing that. I don't see them having that kind of season. I don't see Cincinnati running the table. I don't. I think if they lose to Notre Dame, they'll be out. So, yeah, I honestly, yeah. We'll have to see. Chief Brody says, do you think any of the teams, these Notre Dame teams from 2017 to 21 could beat that Alabama 2012 team? Could they have had could the 2015 team have had a chance against Alabama? Yeah, I think so. Would they have beat them? I don't know. I mean, could they have on a given day beat them? Yeah, I think so. Could the 2017 team, if they would have played Alabama the way that they did from like BC to Wake Forest, could that team have beat that 2012 Bama team? Yeah, I think they'd have a shot. And again, it's not about saying, hey, we can beat this team 8 times out of 10. Can you beat them on one particular day? I look at that 2016 Clemson-Alabama matchup, and I think if they play again a week later, I think Alabama wins by 2 touchdowns. It's just that particular day, Clemson was better. I think in other years, I think if Oklahoma and Georgia, if Oklahoma would have beat Georgia, I think Oklahoma would have beat Bama. And so part of it, too, is matchups, and I mean, if LSU and Clemson played multiple times in 2019, do I think Clemson wins in majority of those? Yeah. So there are some times when it's that way, but could a week later Clemson have gotten hot and a couple plays go their way and beat LSU? Yeah, of course. So that's kind of how I look at it. That's how I look at it. Roman says, this is the first time I've seen you chat in the chat, so I appreciate you leaving a comment and a question for us, or actually it's a comment for us, which I like. I always want my team to be underrated going into the year, then overrated. Agree. Your team gets more motivated. Please keep underrating. That was in reference to Notre Dame being ranked 9th in the AP poll. Michael Shea, great comment. Remember when Clemsoning was a thing? That was very recently. All Notre Dame needs to do is beat one of these big three in the playoff. I agree with you. Yeah, Chief Brody, we heard that Boston College was going to beat Notre Dame last year in their red bandana game too, and that didn't happen. And if you go back and look at like Penn State's whiteout games, their record on whiteout games is not great. It's not what people make it out to be. I think they're over 500, but not by a ton. Revolver 6238. Schauf appears to be out of the picture now. I wouldn't say he's out of the picture now, but it's not looking good for Notre Dame. Thoughts on this O-line class going forward? It's not looking great. I mean, I don't think they're going to get Zach Rice. I don't think they're going to get Billy Schauf. Based on what Tom Loy reported yesterday, I don't think they're going to get Billy Schauf. I say that, not that I'm doubting Tom. I just haven't heard any new info, and I trust Tom. If Tom says that, I trust that's good intel that Tom has got. So if that's accurate, what Tom reported, then that's not a good sign for Notre Dame. I don't love Amir Wagner as a player, and I don't think Notre Dame's a lock to get him at all. And so at that point in time, like, well, who are they going to get? Because they need a fourth lineman, and they need a fourth high upside lineman. And who's that guy going to be? I don't feel great. And is Jeff Quinn good enough to go get that guy? It's a legitimate question, and I don't know if I have the answer to that right now. It's the one position I have the least amount of confidence in Notre Dame's ability to finish right now. Craig Sebring says, who do you think will be the starter next year? I'd be a little surprised if it wasn't Tyler Buchner, but I think that Drew Pine is going to battle. Drew Pine's a good football player. He's a good football player. I just think Tyler Buchner's special. And the fact that I'm hearing so many good things about Tyler Buchner now from just, he's running the offense and he can make reads. He's got a lot to clean up. He's not ready yet. He's not. But evaluating for where he is as a freshman, I'm excited that this getting a year under his belt, another spring, if they can get him some snaps this year, is going to be good for him, in my opinion. Matt Russell, Brian, appreciate your insight and excited about the year. You're welcome, Matt, and thank you for listening and watching and for your comment. And I am too. I'm looking forward to college football as a whole. I think I was talking with a friend last night, and we were going over just the week 1 games, and some of the week 1 games were just insane. It's like you've got Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, Miami, LSU, UCLA, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Penn State, Wisconsin. Even the Purdue-Oregon State game to me is very intriguing. Ohio State plays Minnesota. Iowa plays Indiana. There's some really good matchups this year. And I mean, you got Oregon and Ohio State playing in week 2. You got Michigan playing Washington. This is going to be a fun year of college football, not just for Notre Dame, but just overall. I think it's going to be a fun year of college football. Matt Russell also asked, do you think Jack Coan will have designed run plays this year? I don't see that a lot. I think maybe like on 2nd and 4, they may run like read zone. And if a team's really aggressive backside, he may pull it and run it, just move the chains. I could see some stuff like that. I don't see design runs being a lot of what they do. I think if they want to do design runs, put Tyler Buchner in the game, because Tyler Buchner can take a design run and take it to the house. So that's what I would like to see. Peter Torres says Avery Davis will be the most important piece at wide receiver, a chain mover and the most experienced, but Austin's health is the biggest X factor for the passing game. Peter, very good analysis, very good observations. I think Avery Davis is a very underrated, overlooked player and a very important part to this. He was really good on 3rd down last year, and I think he'll be good on 3rd down again this year. I think he's going to be a key part of what they do. He's not going to have the flashy plays. He's not going to have the gaudy numbers that maybe some other guys have, but he's going to be a very important piece of this. But you're right. I think the receiving core can still be pretty good, even if Kevin Austin doesn't play or is hurt. But I think if this receiving core is going to be really special, it needs Kevin Austin to be at his best and healthy. Craig Sebring says, I think Coan will be surprised by receiver speed compared to Wisconsin's team speed. I tend to agree with that. Craig Sebring says, all I hear is that Notre Dame has to lower their academic standards to get better players. You are there to go to school. I don't agree with that assessment either. I don't think that's true. I think that's insulting. I think that's borderline prejudice, and I don't think it's accurate. I think there's plenty of kids that can get into Notre Dame. It's just Notre Dame hasn't given any reason for those kids to come. Reggie Bush could have got into Notre Dame. Why would he want to go to Notre Dame? If Notre Dame was what they were in the late 80s and early 90s when Reggie Bush was coming out, you don't think Notre Dame would have a chance to get him? Of course they would have. Put a better product on the field, and kids will come. There's a reason they have the best recruiting class under Brian Kelly's tenure, a chance for it right now after 2 playoff appearances in 3 years. They're finally giving kids a reason to come and say, hey, you can play for a championship. You can be a high draft pick. And guess what? Kids are coming. Do you think miraculously it was just a weird year where there's actually highly ranked players that have grades that want to go to Notre Dame? No. There's always those kids. It's just this year Notre Dame's giving them a reason to want to come beyond just the great academics. You have to be able – Marcus Freeman said it correctly. You got to give them all 3. We're going to develop you into a high pick. You're going to get a chance to win a championship, and you're going to get a great education. In whatever order you want to place those, if you want to get the best players, you got to be able to show all 3, not just the academic. You have to show all 3 because great players want to be drafted high and they want to compete for championships. That's how it's been for a long time. And Notre Dame's had 2 of those in recent years. One of those for most of the last 20 years. It was just the academics. The other 2 weren't a piece of it. But they've been putting a lot more guys in the NFL lately and high in the NFL, and so that's helped. But now we've been in the playoff 2 of the last 3 years. We beat Clemson last year in the regular season. Now Notre Dame has a much better product to sell in regards to making these kids think they can play for championships. And lo and behold, they got all these highly ranked kids on their recruiting class in 22 and 23. It's not a coincidence. And it's not just a miraculous year where there just happens to be a lot of kids with good grades. No. There's plenty of kids from the South, from the Southwest, from the West Coast that if you give them a reason to come there beyond just the academics, they will come. You'll be able to get your top players. Malcolm Whitaker, also someone who I think is making their first comment in the chat, which I appreciate, Malcolm. Welcome to the show. Appreciate you stopping by and leaving a comment. All Irish quarterbacks need to be ready and stay ready. We need all of you guys to help us win the championship. Man, I can't wait to see the blue and gold. Notre Dame, let's get it 2021. And that's a great comment because quarterbacks go down, especially with, the way that they're handling COVID and stuff still. There's going to be kids that miss games for COVID this year. I guarantee it. It's going to happen. And so just like we saw with Clemson last year, they lose Trevor Lawrence for 2 games because of COVID. He wasn't sick. He tested positive, and so he was out. That's going to happen this year. And so Drew Pine's going to have to be ready. Tyler Buckner's going to have to be ready. And hopefully it's not because of an injury or Jack Coan not playing well, but there's going to come a time where there's going to be a chance for those guys to have to play. No question about it. DJ Wilson says Coan doesn't have to throw 30-plus TDs. He and Reese have to run the offense efficiently, attack downfield when it's there, use those 2 awesome running backs to be a big part of the offense. I would say not attack down the field when it's there. They need to be a little bit more aggressive attacking down the field, not just when it's there, but create those opportunities. But other than that, I agree with most of what you're saying. I would say that 25 is to me is the minimum. If he throws over 30, that's not a bad thing at all. I just don't think it has to be there for him to be effective. Matthew Southgate, excited for what's to come. Haven't felt this feeling in a long time. No, it's going to be fun. Jacob Hayden says, born and raised in Michigan, so I'm surrounded by U of M fans who think they're the best thing in college football, but curious, why does it seem everyone hates Notre Dame? Embrace the hate. Hey, look, it's simple, Jacob. There's an expression I like to use. They hate us because they ain't us. That's really what it boils down to for me. It's jealousy. Let's get to some more questions. We're going to wrap up here. Dave Snyder, Notre Dame was very effective last year at running the game out last year. Do you have confidence the O-line will be able to do this again this year? I don't want them to have to run the game out. I want them to be able to score and put teams away quickly. I don't think you need a great O-line to do that. And I think the O-line, can be good enough to do that. We need to see it. But that's probably my one biggest question mark. Health at receiver and the O-line are my 2 big question marks. Tyler says, Brian, have you considered a podcast on BK and QB development? Feel we could go on for hours, but prior to Notre Dame, BK had success at quarterbacks at Grand Valley, Central Michigan, and Cincinnati. Yeah, he did. He has not done it at Notre Dame. We've talked enough about it to where I feel like we've addressed it. I feel like just bringing it up now would just be kind of focusing on a negative just to kind of get a negative out there. I've written articles about it, lots of articles about it. We've talked about it in past podcasts. We're now at the point where the season's getting ready to start. It's like, hey, let's see what happens this year, see if it changes or not. And if it changes, then we'll discuss it. If it doesn't change, then we'll talk about it after the season. Hopefully it changes, though. Peter Torres says, if Austin and Lindsey can stay healthy for this season, primarily Austin, how much better could they make the offense? I think if they're available and productive, it will make Avery Davis even better. Agree. I think if Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey stay healthy, I'll be shocked if this team's not scoring 40 points a game. I really will. I really will. I'll be surprised. Like at least 38 to 42. I'll be surprised if they're not in that range. I really will. Chief Brody, what are the chances that everyone who is talking about how difficult Notre Dame's schedule is right now will be saying how weak it was when they're 10-0? 100, like what's a 95% chance that that's going to happen? Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. 100%. Unless Wisconsin, North Carolina, and USC and Wisconsin all only have like one loss and it's to Notre Dame and they're killing everybody else, you're 100% right. 100% right. Matthew Southgate, I definitely agree, Peter. Avery Davis is primed to have a big year. Amazingly, he is getting less hype than the unproven players. And that's natural because he's not as sexy. And I think people kind of know, well, we know what Avery can do. But Avery can't do it by himself. And I think that's the big thing with a lot of people is, look, we've talked a lot about Avery on this show, right? There's no question about it. But what else is there to say about Avery? But if he has a great year and Austin's hurt and Lindsey's hurt, then this receiving core is not going to be as good. Benjamin says, noticed a big difference in Brian. I'm sorry. I answered that earlier. I apologize, Benjamin. We got that in there twice, but it was a good question. Peter Torres, he doesn't get the hype, Matthew, because he isn't like most slots. He can break every single play for 60-yard TD, but he moves the chains and fights over the middle, and that's good enough for me. I think he can stretch the field a little bit better than people think. I think we saw that against Clemson. Cesar, hello, guys. Let's click the like button. The channel always needs help. We agree. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share our stuff. If you like this show or any other show, when you like it, share it. You can share it on YouTube. You can share it on your social media. Share with your Notre Dame friends and family. Absolutely would love that. It helps us grow, and it helps us go out and build our brand. We're going to have a big announcement hopefully tomorrow about that, and it's because of the growth of the YouTube channel and the growth of the message board that we're going to be able to make the announcement that we're making tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. See how I teased that out there? I'm very excited about that. John Erickson says, Brian, love all the info. You work hard to bring us, but still kind of miss the old days when I knew nothing but got a chance to celebrate championships. Hey, if I could have one or the other, I would be there with you as a fan. But for me in this business, I kind of like the way it is now because it gives us a lot to talk about. But I appreciate you being part of the show. Matthew Southgate, you will start hearing Heisman buzz around Coan and Williams come midseason. What the talking heads say preseason rarely translates. Go Irish. You are correct. MKO Strub. I'm just going to take a shot at that. But over under on 20 TD passes this year. If he's healthy, it'll be over. No question. Christopher Galloway, just let the kid play and we can talk about it later. Yeah, but see, that's no fun. We're not going to do that. We're gonna talk every day about something. So we're not going to just sit here and wait till the season's over to talk again. Like, okay, guys, see you later. We'll talk to you in December. That's part of the fun. Part of the fun. Craig Seaburn, Coan to Austin has a nice ring to it. Coan to Lindsey does too. Coan to Keys. I like that sound of that one. Coan to Davis. Coan to Mayer. Coan to Williams. Coan to Tyree. A lot of those. Yeah. Irish Joe says, I am now a Conehead. Yep. Ladarius says, top 5 college QBs I ever witness in no order: Cam Newton, Matt Leinart, Tim Tebow, Sam Bradford, Andrew Luck. Remember, guys, I'm only 30, so I'm talking that witness. And then Tyler says, don't forget Vince Young. And Ladarius says, Vince Young was good, but I think them 5 was better. Well, I don't believe head-to-head always matters, but Vince Young against Matt Leinart in that title game in 2005 was a pretty brilliant game, and Vince outplayed him, no question. I think the thing for Vince is Vince had one great year, whereas Matt Leinart had multiple great years. And that's why I have a hard time putting Cam Newton in there too. Cam was brilliant for that 1 year, but he just played 1 year. There's some quarterbacks that I feel should have been in there. The rest of them, I don't have a huge problem with. I would have Trevor Lawrence in there personally. I would definitely have him in there, no question about it. I'd have him in there probably over Sam Bradford, maybe Cam, but yeah, it's a pretty good list. Pretty good list, Ladarius. Alan English says, Vince Young greater than Tim Tebow. No disrespect, but the 2006 Rose Bowl was an incredible individual performance. Yes, that game was brilliant. Tim Tebow was still the better college quarterback, in my opinion. Matthew Southgate, hopefully elevated play at QB and from the offense in general will help the defense and primarily the secondary. Iron sharpens iron. Agree with that. Connor Nepper, love the optimism as we get closer to the season. Offense is so stacked, we should rarely be punting the ball. We have the bus version 2 as a true freshman. Yeah, it's that time of year to start getting excited. No question. Eric Ward says, I don't want to be ranked high. Never works out for us. I wish we were ranked 15. Craig Seaburn, what freshman receiver could play first? I'd probably go with Styles, but hopefully him and Deion Colsey both play, in my opinion. Cesar says, do we have a good lineup of running backs for this and next season? Yeah, Notre Dame's loaded at running back for this year and next year. Even if they lose Kyron Williams, which I expect they will if he plays well. You got Tyree will be a junior. You got the 2 freshmen. You got Jadarian Price coming in. The running back depth chart, barring massive injuries, is going to be loaded the next couple of years. Watch 2019 Jack Coan highlights and loved his early quarter two run for 25-yard touchdown versus Michigan. He also featured feasted on finding seams in zone defenses, picking up man coverage. And that play against Michigan was great because, Don Brown had that real aggressive blitz, and Jack saw right to his left. He saw that opening, just took off, and you saw that straight line speed that the Notre Dame coaches talked about for that touchdown. But that was a fun game. And he had a really good 4th down and short throw in that game where he threw a deep ball on 4th and 1 that set up another score in that game too. Connor says, got too many great running backs. O-line needs to be animals. I agree, Connor. Jack Foot says, if Kelly relinquishes more of the offense to Reese, what does he do with his time at practice? More bird's eye view observation. Yeah, I think so. Just making sure everything is running. Brian Kelly's a longtime coach who has a lot of insight. There's things he can see. Hey, you know what? Maybe we need to be thinking about this, or how about we run practice this way? Or, hey, let's do this. We need more tempo. Hey, offensively, here's things we can do. I think that's where he could really be an asset to this program. I mean, look, if you're going to be involved in the offense, you need to go back the way it was, where that's what you're doing full time. And he can't do that, which is why I think it was good that he finally gave up play calling duties. So, that's, yeah, but just the big picture thing, use your mind, use your 30 plus years of head coaching experience to really help all aspects of it. And another thing I'd like to see Brian Kelly do, if he is going to relinquish more controls, be more involved in special teams. That's something I'd like to see happen. Terry Howie, BD, how many would you rate our run defense this season? It's too early for that, Terry. I think it can be good. It just depends on being healthy and how much the linebackers improve. I'm hearing good things about Marist and J.D. Bertrand and Drew White and Bo Bauer and all those guys. But I got to see him do it first and show that improvement. But I think it's got a chance to be pretty good. I don't think it's going to be great. I think it's got to be a chance to be pretty good. It's a couple things that have to go into play for it to really be great. Jason Adamiola needs a breakout. Isaiah Foskey needs to be a breakout. I expect Heinisch and Myron to be really good and really solid and steady. Drew White needs to clean up his game. Marist needs to be as good as advertised for what we're hearing about how he's doing. So those things to me are going to be factors in whether or not they play to their potential. Kostrub. Okay. I will try to get that right. I apologize. M. Kostrub, know of any Nashville area ND fans groups pretty lonely here in SEC country. So here's something I think would be fun to do. So I think we're going to do this on the message board. I want to start a chat on the message board where we kind of say, hey, everybody that, kind of shout where you're from. And I'd love to see people able to be able to connect via region. So obviously we can all connect, on forums like this but hey, in your region, people meet up. Hey, watch the game together or come to a game together, whatever the case may be. I think that might be fun. And so, yeah, I definitely know there's some people I was talking to. I have three really good I went Tommy, Chris, Matt, Jeff. Yeah, I have 4 good buddies that live in like the Nashville-ish area that are big Notre Dame fans. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely people there. So we're going to have to connect. So, Kostrub, you need to join the message board, boards@irishbreakdown.com. And I think we're going to do that here over the next couple of weeks, is just really having people connect so people can see who's from where. And I think it'd be a lot of fun. Here we go. Let's see. I think I missed a couple questions. Martini Stirred, great name. Out of the freshmen and sophomores, who will be the biggest impact player on defense? Freshmen and sophomores. I would say I think Clarence Lewis is going to have a shot to play a ton as a sophomore. Obviously, trying Trying to think of who the sophomores were. Riley Mills is having a really good fall camp, I'm told. Freshman Ryan Barnes, I think, has have a chance to play. Prince Colley's really athletic. Gabriel Rubio's having a nice fall camp. So, I mean, those are some of the guys that I would probably look at. I think have a chance. Justin Walters at safety is going to have a chance to play. Those are the guys that I would say are going to have the best chance, in my opinion. Andrew Goss, can Kyron Williams perform as good or better than last year? Absolutely. Absolutely. And the O-line doesn't have to play as well as it did last year for him to do that either. James Scott says, yeah, you can get better players with a better product. However, let's not overlook the bag man at major programs. I get all that, but see, again, the problem with that premise is you're assuming that all players can be bought. Here's an example. I know of a kid that Notre Dame signed out of the Mid-Atlantic region long time ago, really high recruit, good recruit, played in one of the major all-star games, got drafted in the NFL. And he told his dad that a school had offered him some money. He wasn't happy about it. The dad picks up the kid's like they're like, offering me money. And the dad picks up the phone and says, if you ever call my son again, I'm going to report you to the NCAA. Bam, click. Not every kid is down for that. Not every parent is down for that. There's plenty of kids that are look, these kids are savvier than a lot of people think. A lot of these kids are. A lot of these kids know, like, yeah, I could take the money now, but if I go to Notre Dame, I have an opportunity to do this, and this. You don't think some of the players Notre Dame has got in recent years were offered money in high school? You'd be surprised how many kids have signed with Notre Dame in the last 10 years, got offered money to play at other places, turned it down. I know this for a fact. This isn't like me guessing or assuming. I'm telling you, this is what I've been told multiple times, because not every kid is down for that. Not every parent is down for that. And that's what you have to understand is there's plenty of kids out there that aren't that way. Are there plenty that are? Sure, but there's a lot of really good football players out there. All right, let's get the last couple. Troy McIntosh, great show. Any chance Notre Dame recruits Kenji Swanson at OT? He recently committed to Stanford. USC and Ohio State offers. Both of his parents are Indy grads. You know what? You brought this up recently, Troy, and I need to look into this, because this is the second time that you've mentioned this. And so I am going to look into this and see if I'm going to watch the kid's film and see if he's a kid that Notre Dame may be looking at, because they're going to need to start looking here soon. So I appreciate you reminding me of that, Troy, very much. James Scott says, do you think Notre Dame could change up the pace of the game against the regular CFP suspects and play ball control using the passing game? I don't think ball control is any different with the pass game than it is the run game. I think you got to be able to be aggressive. That's what it boils down to. You have to be aggressive. You have to be willing to attack. You're not going to run the clock out against these teams, because if Alabama only has 5 possessions, then they're still going to score 31 points on you, and you're going to score 17 or 14 or whatever. Alabama didn't have a lot of possessions against Notre Dame in last year, and they just scored on all of them. And so you've got to be able to score. You've got to be able to move the ball. You got to be able to attack. Whether you're doing it with quick game, deep game, whatever, but you can get away with that if you have elite playmakers. I don't think Notre Dame has the elite Devontae Smith type of playmakers at receiver that would allow them to do that. So I don't think that would be that's just all it's going to do is what we saw in the Rose Bowl last year, which is you're not going to have a chance to win, but you're not going to get beat by as convincing of a margin as you did in other games, and that's not where Notre Dame should be. James, got to live about a mile north of the stadium, and the flyover path goes right over my house. I can't wait to hear that rumble again. Yes, I agree with you. Christopher Galloway, I live in the Clemson area as a Notre Dame fan. Not fun here either. We need to get all y'all to connect. That'd be a lot of fun. Who has the worst takes as an analyst? Tebow or Desmond Howard? Tebow. Tebow has awful takes as an analyst. I had somebody tell me the other day that they were hoping it was Notre Dame recruiting. It's a guy on Twitter, a buddy of mine, Jack. He was like, he's hoping Tebow makes the team so he doesn't have to listen to him giving horrible Notre Dame takes this year. And I can't disagree with them. Can't disagree with all. Notre Dame 2164 off topic, but do you think BK knows he has waited too long in the past to correct bad assistant coaches? And based on how he is doing better with past flaws, will he jump on Quinn if Quinn starts acting like he coaches O-line at O-line U? Doesn't start acting. I don't think he's ever going to do anything about that. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't. Sparkling Swan. How much longer do you believe Brian Kelly will coach the Irish? I know he has an extension, but do you think he could be like Tom Osborne and stay 15, 20 plus years if he continues to win? I don't think he's going to coach beyond his contract, which runs out in 2024. I could see, I would, if I had to predict or bet, I would bet more on that he leaves early then he stays past it. I don't think he's necessarily going to leave early, but like, let's say Notre Dame goes out and wins a title. Like if you're Brian Kelly, whether it be this year or next year, if you're Brian Kelly, you say, okay, unless I can win it again, which is kind of hard to do. Only thing I can do is go down again. I'm never going to reach this peak, and we've got assistants in place. You know, I'm going to turn it over to so and so or such and such, and keep this thing rolling. I can see that, but I don't see him coaching past 2024. It's a grind being at Notre Dame, and I'm surprised. I mean, he's made it a lot longer than a lot of people have. He was also younger when he got hired, but yeah, I don't see him coaching past 2024. Last few, Tom Ford, Notre Dame have some nice wideouts if they could put it together. Numbers 0, that would be Braden Lindsey, Avery Davis, Kevin Austin, and Lawrence Keys, coming from LSU fan, by the way. Yeah, I think Notre Dame has a lot. I'm glad that you're saying this, Tom, especially if you're not a Notre Dame fan. There's not a lot of people that understand how athletic Notre Dame's receivers are. Last year was a weird year. Some of those guys were hurt, injured. Notre Dame has a lot more talent to position than people realize. Pete Kowaleski says, wondering why you're so low on Joe Wilkins. I think the kid just needs the opportunity. If one of the go-to guys goes down, do you have confidence that Wilkins can fill that big-time role? I'm not low on Joe Wilkins. I had Joe Wilkins graded as a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. I just don't think Joe is a difference maker. I think he can be a good possession guy, a guy that can give you some numbers, a guy that can be a good part of your rotation. I'm not low on him. I just don't think there's all types of receivers that you need. There's the Kevin Austins who can be alphas, and then there's the Braden Lindseys who can be speed guys. There's the Avery Davises, and then there's the Joe Wilkins guys who are important pieces to the puzzle. It's a guy that can move the chains and block and do some of those things. Those are important parts of what you do, but it's not a guy you build your offense around, if that makes sense. And so I hope it doesn't come across that I think he stinks. I just don't think he should be the guy. I don't think he should be the reason you're not playing Avery Davis or Lawrence Keys or Braden Lindsey or Xavier Watts. I mean, it's like last year. It's not that I don't think he should play. It's I think those guys should also play. All right, last couple questions, and we got to get out of here. So I'm going to see if we can get some of these. Domer Grizz, by the end of the season, do you think Kurt Hinish will be getting the most snaps per game in his position? Who has the best chance of overtaking him for playing time? He feels like the weak link on the D-line, which appears to the talent we've recruited there. I disagree with that. Well, he may be the number 4 D lineman, but I wouldn't call him a weak. Somebody's got to be your 4th best guy, right? Like, I don't care how good you are. I mean, you look at Clemson's D-line in 2018, I think all 4 of those guys got drafted. 3 of them were first-round picks. Somebody had to be the worst guy, right, relative to the others. I mean, you could say Kurt Hinish is your least talented, but Kurt Hinish was a good football player last year. He was a really good football player. At times, he was their best D-lineman last year in spurts. Well, not overall, but in spurts. He's a good football player. I'll be shocked if, barring injury, he doesn't get the most reps at nose tackle. And I don't see anyone overtaking him. I think he'll be part of a very good rotation there, but I don't view him as a weak link at all. So I'm going to have to disagree with you a little bit on that one. He's a quality football player. No question about it. Pete Kowaleski says, lucky to have Hinish back. Steady, consistent player, brings grit, experience, swagger, and leadership. Yes, he brings all those things. And maybe he doesn't have 15 tackles for loss, but yet there's a role for that. No question. No question. Connor Nepper says, I'll be in tally for game 1. Do you think Freeman on the sidelines will be a bit of difference maker? I don't think so. If you're saying him being on the sideline just in general, like as the D coordinator, will that be a difference maker? Potentially, yeah. Will him being on the sideline compared to the booth matter? I don't think that matters. I think that's just about whatever you prefer as a coach. I don't think one's better than the other. There's some advantages to some, disadvantages to others. It is what it is. I don't think that's it. But if you just say, hey, just him being here on the sidelines, like generally speaking, like, hey, he's the new coordinator, I think it could be, yeah. But I think the biggest difference maker for Notre Dame is going to be the offense. It's going to have to play at a high level. Justin Knox, can we please see a well-developed screen game with all the playmakers we have in space? Pretty please. I will pass that note along. I'll pass it along. Ryan Olenek, what would it look this year and next for Notre Dame's quarterbacks to win a championship in 2022? I just think it's about getting the ball where it needs to go, making tough throws in tough moments, being willing to attack the field, and then just run the offense as efficiently and explosively as you can. And then it comes down to just, do you have the playmakers around you? I think that's ultimately going to be the thing that determines whether or not the quarterback can win. Look, if Mac Jones was throwing to Javon McKinley and Ben Skoranek, and Ian Book was throwing to Devontae Smith and John Mechie, that game would have looked a little bit different, right? So I think you have to have the talent, but then you need a quarterback that can get that talent to play at an elite level. And then Ryan says, love the show, Brian. Go Irish. Thank you very much for that, Ryan. I appreciate you. Keegan McLaughlin says, which former Notre Dame quarterback would you compare Jack's game to, and why? I don't know if I really compare him to a past Notre Dame quarterback. That's why Notre Dame's had different types of quarterbacks, to be honest with you. And I don't know if I can go back long enough to the Steve Berline years. That's a little bit before my time, but he's not like Tony Rice. He's not like Rick Meyer, because they played some different offenses, and I just don't know if I can compare him to anybody. Part of me wants to say Ron Paulus, if Ron Paulus got to play in a real offense, but again, that's an unfair comparison, because it's hard to really evaluate how good Ron Paulus could have been because of the offense he played in. So I don't know if I have a good former Notre Dame comparison for you, Keegan, to be honest with you. Sorry about that, but I don't. Tavis McKay says, love listening to Irish Breakdown during my work shift. Helps keep me energetic and ready to go. Love listening to Notre Dame football talk, especially from Brian. Tavis, I appreciate that very, very much. Appreciate that very much. Domer Gris says, thanks, Brian. Yes, I didn't mean to imply he is an actual weak link. Appreciate. So I get your point. So what you're saying is, like, he's of the four. He's the. I get what you're saying, and he may be that, but I still think he's a pretty good football player, and I appreciate the follow up and appreciate the question. And we're going to finish up with M. Kostrom saying, great show, Coach D. I'll definitely check out the boards. Please do at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We've grown. So I set my goal. So I kind of have markers I want to get to by the time the season starts. And so we launched the boards in July. And my goal was, by the end of July, I wanted to have a number of people, and we doubled it. I wanted the number that I wanted to get to by the end of August, we got to by the end of July. We're now past the number that I wanted to get to by the time the season starts. So we had a lot of people join. We're continuing to make it better. All those different things. So please jump on board. We're finally this weekend really started to get some good conversation going. So I'm excited about it. But join the boards. Let's talk. Let's engage. Let's build an awesome Notre Dame community that I'm looking forward to. And I want all of y'all to be a part of it in every capacity. Shows, site, message boards, all of it. It's going to be exciting. Going to be fun, and I look forward to building this thing, because all of y'all, if you think about it, we have only had this YouTube thing since February, and all of y'all are the OGs of this thing, right? You guys are on the ground level, and we really appreciate that so much. I can't express it enough to you. But before you leave today, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. If you're listening via the podcast, give us a 5-star review, sign up for the message boards, come be part of our community, so that way we can continue this conversation beyond the show. We can keep it going. So for Vince, I'm Brian. Everyone have a great, great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow. We're going to dive into Notre Dame's schedule, probably talk a little Virginia Tech, a little North Carolina, and try to get the schedule wrapped up here over the next week as we then get closer and closer to Florida State, and we start it's going to be here before you know it. We start our Florida State pregame analysis. So have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you again very, very soon.